السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. أسعد الله صباحكم بكل خير، وحياكم الله في Sudan Health Profession Education Conference. آه، نستأذنكم probably to wait for more additional 5 minutes so that others can join. We will start إن شاء الله our program في خلال 5 دقائق القادمة. شكرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. بسم الله نبدأ إن شاء الله تعالى ورشة العمل. We would like to extend our greatest appreciation for the attendees for joining us through this very important workshop in Sudan Health Profession Education Conference. And I hope all together we have a very insightful session, yet interactive, and we hope we exchange the knowledge and experience I do believe that you all have. My name is Hisham Hassan Ali Dinar. I'll be your host today for this workshop. Um, uh, Today, we'll be talking about um, the concept of business continuity education. So, our objective that by the end of this session, we'll be able to cover some important definitions and concepts, and then we will go through the concept of educational continuity planning process, and what are the tools and the techniques that we can apply to make sure that process is in place. And definitely, as a workshop, we need to have some sort of practice. So basically, we'll have some practice together. We will divide you to a group so that we can have the chance to implement the content that we've learned. I just want to make sure that the screen and the voice is clear to everyone. Can you confirm, please? Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, then. So let's start. So allow me first to ask a quick question for the audience, and please you can raise your hand to answer, or you can post in the chat. Um, who of you in his university or institute has an education continuity plan? You can raise your hand, you can post in the chat if you would. مين من حضراتكم في جهة العمل، الجامعة، الكلية، hospital departments has an education continuity plan? Any raised hands? No? Okay, thank you, Dr. Khalid. Okay, so going through COVID-19, I think that was the starting point of thinking about this concept endeavor. So I'll go right away to our session elements, and then we'll have the chance to discuss all the aspects as we go. All right, hold on. Brilliant. طيب بسم الله نبدأ. So I'll start by playing this video. I would like to draw your attention to this video and before we start.
Thanks. Running late? Yeah, traffic was rough this morning. Crisis averted. No crisis, still traffic. What if there had been a lot of traffic? Everyone needs a backup plan. Just like every company needs a business continuity plan. What just happened? Could be a blackout. Completely unpredictable. Where did you get that? It's important to start your business continuity planning early. How long can you operate without core systems and processes? What if your entire network went down? No communications means no sales and lost customers. This thing working. Finally. Recovery's good, but 75% of companies without continuity plans fail within 3 years. Who's in charge during a disaster?
Like a fire?
Identifying teams and assigning tasks is essential. Everyone needs to know their responsibilities.
What's going on?
It could be a hurricane.
Hurricane?
Weather can badly damage your assets. Planning better prepares your company to recover from any disruption. What? Why are you getting wet? Not everyone's under the same umbrella. It's important to test, update, and exercise your preparedness measures.
So, can we share?
No. A business continuity plan for one company won't fit another. That's why it's important for everyone to develop their own plans. Why are you wearing a mask? Don't forget to plan for the human element. Contingency planning should go beyond natural disasters. Plan for man-made threats too.
Okay, that's the starting point. This video will show us the importance of planning for continuity. And to start with this workshop, we'd like to go through some of the definitions because that will help us to introduce the concept as we go in a very comprehensive way. So let's start by exploring some of the important definitions. All the established protocol at several levels to ensure that the continuity functions are there. That's give us the definition of business continuity. But yet within the business continuity concept, there's a lot of conceptual element that needs to be defined in order to address this definition properly. And then we tailor it back to the educational context, precisely the health professional education context. Now, it's important to know about the term BIA, or the business impact analysis, or in this case, also we can call it the educational impact analysis, which is important concept that needs to be defined as it represents the systematic process to determine and evaluate the potential effects of interruption to critical business operation. So while we are in the process of planning for education continuity, is very important step to address the education impact analysis as a critical function of the overall processes. And of course, the business continuity planning and education continuity planning has several functions. We're going to take it one by one and address it as we go in this particular session. Also let's define the concept of business continuity programs. We have the business continuity plan, we have the business continuity program. And I mean by the business continuity program that it represents the critical framework that all the universities, institutes can implement to ensure that they have a continuity of operations, whether they're in the university, educational activities, or even in the residency programs or skills training. And the purpose of this program actually is to identify any potential interruptions to the education service and to create some sort of a preventable measures to those um, interruption. Now, a well-structured business continuity program typically involves a lot of analytical elements for the education, and by that I mean, that starts or range from determining all the essentials functions within the educational process and understanding the potential impact of this process in the overall education theme, and also it includes developing some sort of plan for not only to ensure continuity of the education process, but also to respond to such emergencies that might jeopardize the educational process as well. Now, while business in general, or health profession education more precisely, uh, must plan for continuity. That's a must. Now, education institutions also face unique challenges. And I think the current situation in Sudan is a good example for that. Now, that's drive us to define what do we mean by the education continuity planning, which is the strategic approach for all education institutes that deliver health professional education to ensure that the learning process serve remains unaffected, and it will be resilient facing various disruptions. And this could be natural disaster, man-made, armed conflicts, war, technological hazards-related emergencies, and others. So the concept here is to have some sort of an overall process to ensure education continuity due to an emergency that's developed from all type of hazards. Uh, oh, sorry. Okay. Okay. Next. Yeah. Now, please, I would like to draw your attention to this slide. It's very important. There's a Global Inform report that categorizes and report the risk and severity indexes for all type of hazards for all countries based on several data that collected from the countries. What you're looking at here is the 2023 report that published in March. We see Sudan has highlighted with a severity index of 4.4. So 4.4 in this severity index means there is very high index in terms of crisis complexity. The reason that we're discussing this to emphasize on the need of education continuity. So we're not far from crisis, we're not far from disasters, and we're not far from other complex situations that requires us to think about how we can plan for education continuity. And this is the whole essence of this activity we are joining today. Now, the Informed Report Severity Index, of course, is a tool that helps us to understand the nuances of crisis within the country. Now, for Sudan, the score of 4.4, that translates the challenges that we are facing in Sudan and triggers the importance of having such education continuity concept on hand. Now, despite the stable designation in this report, we know that the armed conflict started by April 2023. Now, that's add to this report more emphasis in the implication in the health system and the need for education continuity. So in such volatile environment that we have, the continuity of education faces significant threat. Schools might be destroyed, the teachers and the students may be displaced, and the traditional delivery of education become definitely not the suitable choice for health profession education. Now, this is where the education continuity planning become not just beneficial but essential. Now, it's very important that to the concept, the whole concept of education continuity planning, to be more proactive rather than reactive. And by just throwing this question at the start of our session, I think most of the attendees, respectable attendees with us here, being a bit reactive to the need of education continuity, particularly through COVID-19 a couple of years ago. So the escalation to war in Sudan underscores definitely the necessity of having a robust educational continuity, and this should be at several levels, starting by personal level, going to institutional level, and of course at country level as well. So as we consider the high severity index that we're looking at in this slide, and the recent development in Sudan, let's reaffirm our commitment together that we need to work together to have an overall planning for continuity of health profession education. And of course, in this report, the severity index is not the end of the story. There is another element that needs to be addressed in the same report. There is the risk index, which is again a very comprehensive tool that quantifies the risk of humanitarian crisis and disaster in different countries. So the score that Sudan has is 7.1 risk index. That means we can see it's highlighted here in the map. That indicates a very high level of risk. So what does that mean? That means this high score is reflective of a combination of factors, including hazards, exposures, vulnerabilities that contribute to this score and susceptibility to different type of crisis in Sudan. And I think the current armed conflict with the public health situation all add to this point. So in high risk context like Sudan's, as you can see in this map, the fragility of the education infrastructure is major concern, and of course the its potential for disruption, actually significant disruption, and the impact extends from children education to even the postgraduate education, and that's include the health profession education. And in some of the cases, it's very long lasting. For instance, the armed conflict is one of these situations that we need to look at. Now, this risk index has underscored the need for a robust education continuity plan, as we discussed, and the necessity in such a setting. Now, it serves also a lifeline that maintains the provision of education in face of adversity. All right. Okay. So talking about the risk index, definitely through this session we'll address other relevant points, but all what I'm trying to explain here that there is a huge need for the education continuity planning, and again the whole essence, the theme behind this conference is not to allow the score of 7.1 or 4.4 set us back to be a mere statistic, but rather to catalyze for action, and we have the opportunity to make so. And I think this conference is one of these opportunity. I'm quite sure the esteemed attendees we have here, all by its own representation, will add more to this context. Now, building in our understanding of Sudan conflict crisis and the high risk of the environment, this slide visually represents the real world event. the substantial crisis that happened and currently in progress. And I addressed a couple of them in the previous slide. On this screen, you'll see the three pigment images. The first captures, of course, the global COVID-19 pandemic, the health crisis that has affected every facet of the society, including the education, of course. The second shows the devastating floods in Sudan back in 2018, and yet it's a continuous risk considering the current infrastructure we have in Sudan. And the third is around the current armed conflict and war that started back in April 15th, 2023. So the risk and severity indices we previously discussed are not abstract numbers, but they are reflecting in these images representing the challenges we're facing, the disruptions we're expecting at our health education institute. Now, unfortunately, the list of potential and actual emergencies and disaster is very extensive. If you look to the news, if you open the TV, you will see a lot, you will face a lot, and all that add to what we're discussing here, because the concept of risk is cascading. It's not a standalone concept. So basically, when something happened in country X, that doesn't mean we are aware of that. It will have its implication to our health profession education context, and that's the important essence we would like to address to make sure that this is under your scoop or under your magnifier as a health profession educator. So this brings us to the undeniable need for education continuity planning and our strategic response to ensure that the education of health professions and all other sectors are uninterrupted. And we should put in mind that whatever we're planning for to continue our health profession education, it should be something that something adaptable. And would like here to reflect on these images that you're looking for. Let us commit to the prioritization of development and the implementation of the necessary educational continuity strategies to ensure that every responsible entity play their role in hand at this process, of course. All right. Okay. Yeah. Brilliant. So now let's delve into the heart of our discussion. Now, when we would like to talk about the business continuity planning, it's very important that we talk about the critical functions that form the backbone of any robust education continuity plan. So firstly, we need to have the educational impact analysis. Now, educational impact analysis, as we're going to discuss in a moment, is one of the most important steps in this whole process, which we will touch upon in a few minutes as we go. Now, the education and impact analysis is not just a procedural step. It's a strategic approach that helps us to preemptively understand and prioritize the educational functions and resources. It answers, of course, the essential questions. What are the absolute must-have for our educational mission to thrive even during chaos, regardless what is the cost behind this chaos, of course. So there's a common adage that suggests we don't truly value something until it's gone, right? That's a common say that we have during our daily life. However, in the landscape of education continuity, we are championing a proactive mindset. So you don't have to lose something to do something about it. And here comes the essence of the educational impact analysis. So basically, when you plan for this, we need to consider a holistic approach, and we don't need to be reactive. And I think being reactive, yes, it's good. We learn from it, but always the earlier we think about education and impact, education continuity planning, the better the outcome would be. And it's very important for us as health profession educators to think about this. And now understanding the operational structure is vital. And because it's the blueprint of how we function and respond when normalcy is appended. It's not only about the what, but it's also about the how we adapt, how we communicate together during disruptions, how we maintain the order in face of disorder, how our faculty can carry out their daily activities as educators or facilitators during crisis. The protocols we establish, both in internal or external emergencies, serve as our guide through these uncharted waters. Now, this brings us to the preparedness cycle that you're looking at the right of this slide. Now, an iterative process vital to the education continuity planning. We plan, we organize, we train, we exercise, we evaluate, and then there's always a room for improvement. So we need to consider this as part of a cycle while we are planning for continuity of education. The cycle is not a one-time journey, but it's a continuum. It's a continuous loop that enhances our readiness to any type and source of disruption during emergencies. Now, as we proceed, remember that the preparedness is not just about having a plan. No, it's about embodying the culture of resilience and adaptability in our health professional education. So our goal is to ensure that we're faced with adversity. Education doesn't just survive by itself. It continues to grow and excel as we learning as a group here, as a decision makers, as a policy makers, that this is something of our policies on our institutes. Now, continuity in health profession education is not a standalone concept. It's an integrated process that must be resonant through every layer of the academic and the clinical setting. It's about ensuring that the training of all elements of health professional education is uninterrupted, regardless what are the challenges that we are facing. So basically, in this domain, the business continuity planning serves as a framework, and that underpins our ability to deliver consistent quality education training to health professions. Now, so you cannot separate the education continuity planning from the overall concept of the business continuity plan. And there's different schools and approaches I will discuss in a moment. And I'm going to guide you in a stepwise approach to the simplest and the easiest so that you can consider it as a health profession education as we go through this session. All right. So the scope of practice in health profession education is wide ranging and include, of course, the classroom instruction, the clinical rotations, the lab work, the research, and etc. So the concept of business continuity strategies must cater to this diversity of education activities to ensure that all the facets of education continuity smoothly in any situation. Now, the threats to the educational structure itself can be due to a wide range of emergencies. It's very important here to emphasize on always wear the glasses of all hazards approach. Don't focus in one type of emergency. Consider the all hazards approach for planning for education continuity, because by that, we'll ensure that we are addressing all the critical functions that we're going to discuss in a moment. Now, we need to think also about the implications of those emergencies, whether in the infrastructure, for instance, the educational structure in health professional education can be affected by cyber attack or loss of critical data. And again, the efficient management of these resources is paramount. In health education, the cascade effect of risk can be very significant. It can affect not just the current learning process, but also the future student and also the patient care. And that's why it's very important to think beyond the current situation of delivering the education. In that sense, our business continuity plan must be multidimensional, addressing the immediate needs, and also think about the systematic vulnerabilities that comes after each emergencies. And we look at it at a 360 approach. Now, adopting a systematic approach in continuity plans allows us to preempt the interconnected impacts of the disruption. And by doing so, we ensure that the training of health professional education remains continued, and the critical components of this process is in place without being affected. So the whole essence of this talk and our goal is to weave the business continuity plan into the fabric of health profession education, and by doing so, we can assure that our commitment to the education for the next generation and the current generation of healthcare provider is upheld, even when faced with unforeseen challenges. And here come the role as you as a health professional education to be part of this. Now, around the world, there are numerous frameworks. So we need to keep open-minded as we discuss this element. There's a lot of frameworks, there's a lot of guidelines, there's a lot of models, but I will guide you, inshallah, in this particular workshop in the easiest ways to address the education continuity planning. And I go with you step by step to make something out of this workshop and implement it back in our personal setting. So around the world, there are these numerous models, but today I'll introduce, as I mentioned, the simplest way for that. Now this approach is basically designed to be adaptable and robust. So through that, we'll address the unique challenges faced in health education, regardless where you are. Afwan. From classrooms, instruction, or even clinical placements. So let's walk through the table displayed here. And it outlines the critical steps that we need to take when developing a business continuity plan for the university, or even for the country, or even for the healthcare facility. And that's definitely include the concept of education continuity planning as part of it. Now, we start always by establishing a dedicated planning team that includes experts who understand the whole essence and the process of health profession education. And I'll give some of the examples as we go in our discussion. We need to conduct what we call the education impact analysis or business impact analysis, and we ensure we are aware of all the potential disruptions and their impact. We also need to identify the mission's essential functions, and the resources helps us to prioritize to protect our core educational activities. Also, we need to consider the setting of very clear objectives and elements to provide us with a measurable goals and a framework for our plan. So when we do so, then we need to define our organizational structure and execution model for this plan to make it happen. It's not just having the org structure alone, but again, you will have the objective, you will have the action plan based on the org structure that you put in place in your healthcare facility or the institution for this purpose. Now, for the recovery, we need also to plan for the activation protocols, when to activate our education continuity plan, when to deactivate it, and saying that we need to address the concept of recovery or going back to normal, which include recovery KPIs for tracking the progress, and the de-escalation process or the deactivation protocols for our plan in our health profession institute. For sure, having a product needs to be approved, but it's not a matter of putting a signature of the responsible person. There is a huge importance of that, of translating the concept of leadership engagement in this process. And the approval will give us some sort of accountability that everyone in this organization and institute is obliged to follow this framework to maintain our operations as a provider for health profession education. And finally, if you have this document and you have this plan, we need to train, we need to disseminate the document, we need to evaluate, and always there's a room for improvement. So in the following sections, I'm going to explore each step in detail and discuss how we can work together so that to implement this step and tailor it back to the context. Probably before I go to this step, I've just mentioned that we need to keep open-minded. الفكرة الأساسية إنه يوجد عدد من النماذج في التخطيط لاستمرارية عملية التعليم، تعليم الممارسين الصحيين والتعليم الطبي، في عدد من الخطوات، عدد من الأدوات، عدد من الاستراتيجيات. لكن اللي حنناقشه إن شاء الله اليوم together is basically the simplest step. We implemented through several programs, more than 121 directorate providing healthcare and health profession education, and it proved success. And it's composed basically of the steps that you're looking at. فيهمنا جدا نمشي على هذه الخطوات، لكن I will pause for a moment هنا before we go ونناقش الخطوات دي step by step ونعرف كيف بنطبقها إن شاء الله تعالى to plan for education continuity. If you have questions, so you can raise your hand or just you can post in the chat. We can have a couple of questions before we proceed. Okay. All right. So there's a question here. Thank you very much. There's a question from Dr. Nahid, how to conduct the education impact analysis. That's the next step. Inshallah, we'll discuss it thoroughly بإذن الله تعالى. And حنعرف خطواتها بالتفصيل، وعندي مجموعة من النماذج حشارككم إياها. We are going to practice together هذا الموضوع just to ensure that everyone got the idea behind it. There is another question from Dr. Nahid. What is the difference between the mission and the objective, please? So here, the mission objective, not from quality perspective. There is a term in business continuity planning. When we say mission here, we're talking about the essential functions that needs to be carried out or continued in the education process. And I'm going to show you how we even choose that as an educator or health profession educator. And the objectives here also, it's not related to the classical definition of the objectives in the quality context. But here we're talking about the objectives for the educational continuity process to continue. And then we're going to know how we can translate these objectives into action plans as part of education continuity process. Thank you very much for your question. All right, so we'll move on. let me share screen. Where is it? Okay, here it is. Okay, brilliant. طيب بسم الله نبدأ. من المهم جدا زملائي واخواني في ورشه العمل، بليز الفكره الاساسيه في موضوع استمراريه عمليه التعليم انه نفهم الخطوات اللي حنمر عليها الان. these 10 steps, if we know how we do these 10 steps اعتقد انه المخرج حيكون انه every institute we're working in حيكون عندها خطة لاستمرارية عملية التعليم وخطة لاستمرار عملية المؤسسة ككل. فنحن حنمشي على الخطوات دي كلها، هشرح كيف حنعملها بإذن الله، حديكم بعض الأدوات، حنشتغل مع بعض على هذه الأدوات. And yes, there is a lot of tools and techniques there. So I'm going to share a couple of them inshallah in the chat so you can download it. لكن يهمنا بأبسط طريقة نطلع مع بعض بالخطوات الأساسية of how we can do that to make a difference in our health education process. وأعتقد الوضع الآن في السودان يحتم علينا نعرف كيف نطبق الخطوات دي وناخدها إلى الجهة اللي نحن فيها to reach to a resilient system that carry out the education process as we go. طيب نبدأ. The first step in the process is establishing the planning team. So in the development of a business continuity plan, an education continuity plan within health professional education, it's very vital to establish who should be at the helm. So the composition of the planning team is a crucial step, and it equals the plan itself. So one of our esteemed professors earlier, he kept always remind us that planning is everyone's business. It's not only the department head or even the university administration or the medical school dean or etc. It's everyone's business, because the education, if the education process is interrupted, then everyone will be affected. So in that sense, it should be everyone's business. Now, the first we need to think about that the honor of the educational business or the academic setting is typically a combination of probably senior faculty, department heads, education administrations, the quality department of the university. Considering the diversity of the org structures in different schools, there are different elements. But again, the message here, I'm not saying that you need to work on the university or the school org structure to start the education planning. You need to start education and planning yesterday. If not yesterday, it's today. And you plan for that based on the setting that you have, rather than start working everything together and then starting the education process, because an emergency or a disaster doesn't wait and doesn't knock the door. That's the reality that we need to understand. And in that sense, we need to think together as a health professional education of how we can do that. All right. So basically, we need to address as a planning team some of the question. What are the academic outcomes are not negotiable? And that's a good example that represents the critical function or critical mission. So what are the academic outcomes are non-negotiable? ايش الحاجة اللي يجب أن تستمر بغض النظر عن الوضع اللي موجود سواء كان حروب أو غير حروب? Who among the faculty and the staff is best equipped to maintain these outcomes? Afwan. And I mean by that here, who's sorry. And I mean by that the resources available to implement the education continuity plan, and how can we adapt our teaching methods to ensure continuity. All these questions needs to be on the table when we're establishing this education continuity planning team. If we go back during COVID-19 pandemic, several universities established dedicated teams to ensure the continuity of education, but yet it was reactive. For example, the University of Redlands focused on leveraging technology to enhance the education experience for the students, but they recognize that the importance of continuity planning to maintain the operational effectiveness and to fulfill these mission and other missions like research, teaching, learning during disrupt events like pandemic is important. And also they emphasize in this experience the need for instructors to maintain open communication with the students and provide resources for conducting the classes online, which included tips for effective online communication and tools for self-directed learning content. If you think about it, it's all around the basic principles of modern health profession education we are addressing now. And yes, we in Sudan has a similar experience in different schools, but yet it was also reactive. So similarly, MIT in USA took a proactive step to ensure that education continuity is on hand. So they urge faculty to start using digital tools, online contact, and other modes to teach remotely. They also plan to alter the syllabi, reschedule the exams, and create new ways of assessing the students as they go. Now, the MIT leadership work on developing a dynamic information site and resources to support the education continuity, and other faculty and instructors to help offer as much education continuity as possible. They also emphasize on the compliance with the guidelines in place to provide a dedicated a dedicated email so that when the students have queries, or even the faculty have queries, they can reach out to this supporting team through email, and all this comes hand by hand in what we're discussing right now. Another example has been through Yale University in USA. They had a comprehensive approach. They have multiple contingency planning committees, so they structured different committees for contingency planning. They established an academic continuity committee and subcommittee focusing on the in-person and online education planning. Also, they address the residential and the extracurricular planning among others. So these committees composed of faculty members from various departments and were chaired at high-ranking academic officials. These rules involve the planning for different aspects of the university operations during the pandemic, for education delivery to the residential life. So, and yes, we are lucky today to have one of the most important sessions probably today. Please don't miss it, which around the student support and the importance of establishing a very effective education support, which play again a very important role in ensuring a resilient education for our health professions. So these examples illustrate how universities deploy a mix of strategic planning, technology integration, faculty collaboration to adapt the unprecedented challenges posed by pandemic. So the focus was on minimizing disruptions to teaching and learning while ensuring the safety and well-being of all the members of the health professional education community. وواحدة من الأشياء الأساسية اللي حنناقشها خلال اليوم إنه even when you set objective as part of the planning process, كيف نحن نضع الحكاية دي، وحنعرف أهمية تكوين هذه المجموعة للتخطيط في وضع هذه الأهداف لاستمرارية عملية التعليم. So it all start by having a very solid objective for education continuity. Now, complementing to this, a process expert is very important to be incorporated in this process and the academic need to ensure that we have a comprehensive framework for business continuity in the university. Now, the focus on the how, mapping out the steps, protocols, resources necessarily to transform the strategy into action, that needs an expert, a process expert. And here comes your role as an expert in the health profession education to play this part in your setting. Now, in an academic institution, these roles might be filled by a dedicated emergency preparedness committee or through partnership between academic affairs and the campus operations, like groups of business continuity planning and etc. So the message here is that use whatever resources that you have to plan for continuity at your setting starting now. You don't need to wait for that as we go. So this is very important. So as we explore the steps listed in the table from establishing the planning team to the recovery of the disruption on hand and the improvement process, we'll discuss the application of each step in the academic environment. Now, let's take a moment again if you have any question in the first step. The summary of this step is that you need to have a team. This planning team usually composed of different of the senior academics in the university, but again, you need in general to have a process expert and a business or a content or academic owner. And that is representative usually by the administration. And you don't need to start after you work on the org structure of your university or your setting, but you can start now by developing whether a committee or technical group to develop such education plan. So I'll stop here if you have a couple of questions before we move to the second step. Any questions so far? We discussed so far the definitions of continuity, business continuity planning, the concept of educational continuity planning. We addressed the need and the importance of that. And also we discussed the overall process. The first step is to initiate and establish a planning team. So we've just discussed this planning team and how we can develop it and what its role in the overall education continuity planning process. So if you don't have a question here, probably I'm gonna proceed to the second step. All right. All right. Going back to the slide. Yeah, perfect. Okay. Let me mute this. My apologies. Brilliant. So now the second step, I'll go back here to your question, Dr. Nahid, which is how we do the business impact analysis or the educational impact analysis. And actually, as we move forward, the next critical step is this step. And to me, this is one of the most important steps in the overall educational planning, education continuity planning. The educational impact analysis. So this is where we assess the potential risk to our institution and for education delivery. And I'm going to show you precisely as we go how you're going to do that and what are the steps that we can, what are the tools, sorry, that we can use. First step is to define the risk. Now, defining risk is a faceted process that must encompass all aspects of the enterprise risk. That's, of course, including the strategic risk, operational risk, the hazards related risk, and the financial risk, among others. Now, in health profession education, this includes considering risk for man-made event, technological failure, hazardous material incidents, and natural hazards related disaster. And believe it or not, all types of all these hazards might affect the overall education process. Once we have identified these risks, we will proceed to the development of a risk profile. And this, of course, involves the evaluation of the impact of each risk against its likelihood, helping us to understand exactly which scenario could be most disrupting and could be the most disruptful scenario to our educational objectives. Now, from our risk profile, we will craft several scenarios that range from the most common to the manageable to those that are less likely but could have a catastrophic consequences. And this step is crucial actually for stress testing to our education continuity plan against a variety of potential challenges. And with our risk defined and the scenarios mapped, we can then determine the next step, which is the appropriate mitigation strategies. In our academic environment, there are a lot of these. But in general, there are structural strategies that might involve the physical change to our classrooms, the labs to enable the social distancing as we had back in COVID-19, while the non-structural strategies, that includes, for example, to modify the curricula or even to adopt a hybrid approach or a HyFlex approach as part of our education continuity plan. Now, giving some examples, consider the onset of COVID-19 pandemic, where most of our institutions had rapidly transitioned to online learning. Before that wasn't the case, and that's why we started from COVID-19. We started to talk about the new norm. Our esteemed professor Sahel had a wonderful session about the new norm in education after COVID-19. I invite you to attend also another session in that regard of the adoption of technology that will be presented by him during the main conference program. All right. Now, to do so, we need to understand exactly what are the content of our educational process as an institute, and then you think about how you do this and how you can incorporate this into the overall education continuity plan. باختصار الخطوة الأساسية إنه أنت تعرف إيه هو الخطر. You need to know exactly what is the risk. عشان أنا أعرف الريسك عندي أدوات. الأدوات دي حنعرف بعض الأمثلة لها وحنطبق مع بعض. و I'm going to share it with you so that you can use it. بعد ما أعرف الخطر, I need to know exactly what is the profile. أي الأخطار هو الأكثر توقعا إنه يصير والأكثر تأثيرا على التعليم الطبي عندي. In that sense برضو لازم أعرف دي تعتبر طبعا واحدة من الأولويات، الأشياء اللي حترتب لي أولوياتي في التخطيط لاستمرارية عملية التعليم. لكن وجود الخطر ومعرفة الخطر ليس هو الهدف، إنما وأنا بخطط لاستمرارية عملية التعليم لازم أضع بعض الاستراتيجيات اللي بتخفف من واقع هذا الخطر إذا صار. وبالتالي here I choose some of the mitigation strategies، ودي قسمناها إلى زي ما ذكرت قبل شوية إلى هيكلية وغير هيكلية. هيكلية معناتها أنا أشتغل على الانفراستراكشر اللي موجودة في الميديكال سكولز أو الهيلث بروفيشنال إديوكيشن سكولز بحسب طبيعة الخطر. لو كان الخطر نحن بنتعامل مع floats, then I need to work على الانفراستراكشر of the university to make sure that the education process is not interrupted by this floats. اذا انا والله بتعامل مع حاجه تتطلب non structural mitigation strategies زي زي التعليم التثقيف الصحي during COVID-19, then social distancing, teaching the students, teaching the faculty, and follow the national guidelines in that regard. دي واحدة من الاستراتيجيات التي يجب أن نتطرق عليها. لكن برضو نقطة مهمة جدا إنه it's not just the case إنه والله أنا عارف الخطر. You need to think about scenarios. والسيناريو ده حيسهل عليك بعدين إنك تنتقل من خطوة اللي هو مستند الخطة إلى خطوة تفعيل الخطة وتنفيذها بسهولة. In that sense بنفكر في risks that's been identified with the common scenarios. يعني والله أقرب السيناريوهات في هذا الخطر الذي سيؤثر على عملية التعليم هو كذا. And the unexpected scenarios اللي هو نحن بنسميه في ال concept of education continuity planning سيناريو X، حاجة ترتبط بالخطر لكن سيناريو معقد جدا بعيد يحصل، لكن لو حصل عنده huge implications على عملية التعليم. So this scenario X should be put in mind as part of your education process. All right, so عرفنا الخطوة الأولى إنه والله نحن حنكون الفرق. الخطوة الثانية حنبدأ في عملية الإديوكيشن إمباكت أناليسيس، واللي بتبدأ بمعرفة الخطر، معرفة اللي هو وضع عدد من السيناريوهات وفقا للبروفايل اللي يتعمل، نضع بعض السيناريوهات، نخطط للميتيجيشن استراتيجيز. لكن الموضوع ما بيجي هنا، بيستمر لخطوة مهمة جدا which exactly about the mission essential function, and that's a term I addressed earlier, Dr. Nahid, when you ask about it. هنا احنا بنتكلم على critical functions اللي هي critical function that needs to be identified as part of the education impact analysis, and it's very important to continue regardless of the situation. That gives you the priority of the educational element that needs to continue, because at the end of the day, if a disruption happens, you cannot do everything as usual. So you need to prioritize what is important in the overall education process, and then you plan how you can do it. And always remember, please, remember that it's not just the responsibility of the institute. It have layers and levels. It is started by the institute, the government, national level, and even at personal, departmental, unit level. Everyone is on board. Everyone should consider the education continuity planning as a part of this process. All right. So an indispensable step in developing the business continuity plan for the university and the education continuity planning to carry out the health profession education is to identify the essential functions. These are the core activities that are critical to our mission of educating health professions. All right. So in that sense, we must evaluate what would happen if certain education functions were interrupted. For instance, if clinical rotations were delayed, it could mean a significant setback in practical skills or in educating skills for our medical students. Sorry, and potentially affecting their readiness for residency, and even beyond that, to carry out the regular healthcare service in our health system, whether in the city or at national level. So identifying the necessary resources for each function is next. So you need to identify what are the critical functions that needs to continue, and then you need to identify the necessary resources for each function. And that includes, of course, the faculty technology for virtual learning, access to clinical settings, and other educational materials. The adequacy of these resources can make a breakout in our continuity efforts in a negative way or in a positive way. So basically, لو أنا عايز اخترت الوظيفة الأساسية في العملية التعليمية التي يجب أن تستمر، إذا جزء من هذه الخطة إنه أحدد إيه الموارد اللي أنا أحتاجها to continue this process. We also must consider how often each function occurs. يعني خليني أقول حاجة في العملية التعليمية من الناحية الإدارية أو الناحية الفنية أنا حأعملها كل يوم. It differs from حاجة أنا ما بعملها regularly. حاجة في العملية التعليمية ترتبط ب critical decision making، تختلف على حاجة تعتبر داعمة في استمرار عملية تعليمية. الفكرة الأساسية we always should consider the criticality on deciding this. For instance, regular lectures might be easier to move online, but lab-based sessions that occur less frequency might require more resources to adapt to a visual format. OSCE exams, moving from standard OSCE or classical OSCE to virtual OSCE, and we have a beautiful session in the conference, inshallah, about that. Don't miss it, please. So the essence here, the message here, is always we need to think about the criticality of the mission area, the function that needs to be continued before we continue our education planning process. Hold on. Allow me a moment. Can you see my screen properly? I'm just checking. I've been notified that there's an issue in my screen. Can you see my screen properly? Okay. All right, brilliant. So I'll consider answering this question before I go back to the presentation. There's a question here again. Brilliant. Thank you, Dr. Makarim. The question is, so it's about risk assessment, then prioritization the problem, and identifying the necessary resources for it to continue. Brilliant. That's sum it up. Thank you very much, Dr. Nahid. Thank you very much, Dr. Makari, for confirming that the screen is clear. Now, all right. Now the following step here is around the objectives and elements of our education plan. Now, when we talk about setting objectives for our business continuity plan or education continuity plan, it's crucial to understand that these serve as our guidepost. They articulate what we aim to achieve with our plan in the context of health profession education. So the first level consists of general objectives. You need to have a general objective that is common to all business continuity plan and education continuity plan. في أهداف أساسية موجودة في أي خطة استمرارية أعمال أو خطة استمرارية عملية تعليم طبي. دي لازم تخطوها as is في أي خطة، لأنه ده زي ما بيقولوا الميثاق الأساسي in this process. لكن في أشياء تانية خاصة it depends على الكونتكست، على this profile، على الخطوة السابقة اللي احنا اتكلمنا عنها. So these are the broad goals that ensure the resilience of our educational programs. Now, these typically include maintaining the educational quality, ensuring the safety of the students and the faculty, the upholding of accreditation standards, etc. So these are non-negotiable and align with our institution mission. Afwan. So please put this as a step in the overall objectives or the goals of the education continuity plan. That's a must. But beyond that is the second level, which involve the scenarios of specific objectives, and these are tailored to particular events, such as transitioning from a remote lecture during a pandemic, or ensuring the continuity of clinical placement in the event of health crisis. For each scenario, we must ask ourselves what specific outcomes we are looking for and must be achieved to consider our continuity or a plan successful in this context. فالفكرة الأساسية إنه والله have overall objectives. والله لازم تستمر عملية التعليم هذا context. لازم يكون عندنا high quality education. لازم يكون we ensure safety في للstudents للfaculty. يكون ده الشيء الأساسي. لكن we have a particular and precise stress profile for each entity and institute. From that point, we need to seek specific objectives for each scenario of the scenarios and how we're going to respond on that and continue our education as we go. In that sense, I'll give an example. For instance, consider the objective we said during COVID-19 pandemic. One general objective was to transition all feasible courses to online format without even compromising the learning outcome. The scenario-specific objective was to ensure that students in the clinical rotations could continue to gain practical experiences, and even if in a modified or a virtual environment. وزي ما ذكرت لحضراتكم, don't miss the concept of OSCE in disruption. Very important session إن شاء الله حتكون خلال برنامج المؤتمر. Now, defining this objective is an iterative process that requires input from all stakeholders, and that's for sure include the faculty, the administrators, and even the students. In this collaborative approach, that help us to craft a business continuity and education continuity that is realistic between two brackets. It should be realistic, it should be achievable, and it should reflect the diverse need of the education continuity of the education community of our own setting. Because with clear objective in place, we can design an education continuity plan that's not only responds to disruption, but also it proactively addresses the potential challenges. In that sense, as we outline in our plan's structure and the execution model in the next steps, these objectives will direct our strategy. And I really encourage you now to consider what objectives exactly you would prioritize in your areas and implement it in your personal setting as considering the current situation we have. All right. Excuse me. All right. The following step is the organizing structure and the execution model, as I mentioned. And with the planning team established and our objectives خلاص set, now we need to turn to the organization structure that will execute our education continuity plan. It's very important, and I would like here to draw your attention into a very important concept, which actually represent the tactical part of this concept. So the structure is pivotal in the coordination of our response to any disruption that might occur in our health profession education programs. So in a standard business continuity plan for the organization, the structure typically include a continuity leader, technology, communications, a scope of service for the continuity team, and a support team. طيب باختصار القضية الأساسية التي يجب أن نفهمها في هذا السياق إنه في حال حدوث طارئ أو حصل أي انتربشن لعملية التعليم الاعتيادية، نحن الآن في حاجة لعمل شيئين أساسيين ولازم يحصلوا في نفس الوقت. يعني it's not a water flow approach، يعني خلص واحدة ونمشي للثانية. We need to respond to the emergencies that occur, and we need to execute our education continuity plan. طبعا في الحالة دي حناقش معكم الآن so I'd like to address here two important things. يجب أن يكون هنالك هيكلة تنظيمية لضمان استمرارية عملية التعليم. الهيكلة دي تسمى لجنة، تسمى إدارة، تسمى فريق عمل، تسمى أيا كان الاسم، لكن أنا حوريكم الحد الأدنى من الهيكلة التي يجب أن تكون موجودة لتطبيق مفهوم عملية استمرارية التعليم أو عملية استمرارية الأعمال أو العمليات بحسب نطاق الخدمة، يعني بحسب نطاق العمل في الجهة. وكمان حوريكم إنه كيف نحن إيش الهيكلة المناسبة عشان نحن نستجيب لهذا الطارئ، كذلك داخل our institute. وهنا في مجالات عديدة لهذا الشيء. في أعلى الشاشة at the top of the slide and the screen بتلقوا عندنا الهيكل التنظيمي in blue. Sorry, it's a bit vague, but in general for the minimum elements for an education continuity org structure, it should include a team leader. For each education continuity plan, it should have a continuity leader. It's not only continuity leader, a backup for the continuity leader and a backup for the backup of the continuity leader, and consider this for all the needed function in the education continuity plan structure. So the continuity team leader should oversee the entire business continuity plan and education continuity plan, ensuring that all parts of the plan are harmonized and executed effectively. And when we talk about education continuity, they should be part related to the technology and communication. And here, the team will be responsible for maintaining the digital infrastructure. We're talking here about the infrastructure of technology and communication at the university or the healthcare setting that will be necessary for remote learning and information dissemination. And of course, when we talked earlier about the levels of the education continuity plan, they should be what we call the scope of service continuity team. And that actually will be focusing on carry out the regular activity of the institute to ensure that there are specific educational services to continue and meet the needs of the students and the faculty. On the other hand, to respond to an emergency at the right lower bottom of the slide, you will have what we call the incident command system. The incident command system is a very common structure, and it's been advocated by many organizations, including the WHO, including the CDC, including the FEMA in America and other countries. But yes, there are other frameworks to respond to an emergency at educational setting. The idea here, this structure that we call the ICS or the incident command system proves efficacy and efficiency. Why is that? Because it ensures flexibility, adaptability, continuity of operation, and it's cascadable and integratable, meaning it can be integrated as we go in all the layers of the university and the org structure, from a personal level to the departmental level to the university level as well. Now we reach to the sixth step in planning for in education continuity planning. So probably I'll stop here to take a couple of questions. We discussed so far how we establish the team, how we do education impact analysis, how we we identify the resources, and how we set the objectives and the organization structure, whether to respond to the disruption or even to carry out the education continuity plan. And please remember, the education continuity organizational structure is not the education continuity planning team. It's different. It can be the same, but this is something to be decided by the entity. But they're not the same. So basically, you need to consider this and don't mix it in that area. So I'll take a couple of questions before we go. Okay. Do you have any questions so far? Okay. Any questions? All right. No news, good news. So I'll go back to my slides. Okay. Yes, brilliant. طيب. Now, as we go, we're going a bit technical. So please be attention to the following steps. احنا الآن كونا فريق. الفريق وضع أهداف، حدد البروفايل حق المخاطر and what are the critical functions اللي حتستمر في عملية تعليمية. بعدين بدأ يضع الأهداف العامة تكلمنا عنها، الأهداف الخاصة وفقا للسيناريوز identified. حددنا هيكل تنظيمي للاستجابة للاضطرابات اللي ممكن تحصل في العملية التنظيمية، وفريق أو هيكلة تنظيمية لاستمرارية عملية التعليم. بعدين جينا للخطوة اللي بعديها اللي نحن حنتكلم فيها على الاكتيفيشن بروتوكول. انت الان عملت خطة، بس الخطة دي believe it or not you need to have a key for it. يعني انت حتبدا خطة استمرارية التعليم متى؟ what are the activation pillars لعملية التعليم دي نحن لازم نضعها في الاعتبار ونخططها بحيث انه it's already presetted واضحة ومحددة والجميع عارفة. once activated خلاص الناس will carry out the planned activities as usual. طيب كيف نحن بنعمل الحكاية دي؟ you need to consider the following. So in health profession education, a swift, effective response is essential for maintaining the continuity of the academic and clinical programs. So it needs to be quickly. And that's why having a clear protocol for activation for our business continuity plan for the university or the education continuity plan that comes as part of it, or it's all considered as education continuity plan is very critical. Now, the decision to activate the business continuity plan typically falls under the academic leadership. That's usually come from the head of the institute. يعني مدير الجامعة، عميد الكلية، مدير القسم، مدير الوحدة وهكذا. So basically, the head of the institute will have the authorization to typically activate the education continuity plan. And this may be, by the way, as I mentioned, others based on experience, but given the authority by the decision maker at the institute level. So the activation mechanism should be straightforward. I mean, it shouldn't be complex and it should be accessible. So in many cases, this involves integrated communication system that can quickly relay messages to relevant parties, from faculty to students, ensuring that everyone is aware of the situation and the action being taken. In a country level, that's we call it the early warning system, but it's the same concept. So basically, we tailor it back to the education context that everyone should be notified about the emergency and the disruption on hand, and everyone should be aware that we activated the education continuity plan, Protocol X. Protocol X can be for any one of the pathways that I'm gonna shed the light in a moment. So the activation also may not always mean the implementation of the entire business or education continuity plan. Afwan. It depends on, for instance, if a sudden infectious outbreak occurs within a campus or clinic, it may be necessary to activate only the health and safety protocols in the education continuity plan without disrupting the other functions of the institution. فالفكره الاساسيه انه انت it's not an all or none approach للاكشن potential. No. في الاديوكيشن كونتينيتي بلان ممكن انت تفعل فيها بروتوكول معين او جزء معين بحسب سيناريو وقع. يعني اذا كان تاثير مثلا على مستوى faculty then we activate faculty protocol. لو حاجه ترتبط بالسيفتي we activate safety protocols and go on. فالفكره الاساسيه انه you need to consider what exactly the area being impacted, and you address the protocol insight and put it in place into action. Effective communication is the backbone. The number one reason for emergency management failure is communication failure. So the more we focus on the effectiveness of communication between us, then there will be better control of the issue, there will be better coordination of our response, and better implementation of our education continuity plan. So in that sense, we should ensure that we have a very effective, robust system that enough to disseminate all the needed information quickly and efficiently. And definitely that include emergency alerts, emails, updates on the institution official channels, website, the university websites, and etc. And please, one of the things that is very important to think about is to make use of the technology infrastructure that we have in our university. From my personal understanding, that it's not used efficiently. There is website, but I think there's a big role for these websites to be incorporated in our education continuity planning setting. And then the plan should outline how to relocate resources effectively. So in a health professions context, that could mean redirecting the students to alternative clinical sites or providing virtual simulation experiences. So when in-person training is not possible, that might be one of the important areas to consider. وعادة نحن في موضوع الساينس دي والانفراستراكشر او اللوكيشن في مفهوم طويل قد لا يسمح الوقت في مناقشته في خلال ورشة العمل دي، لكن السبب اللي انا يعني اذكر فيه النقطة دي انه حتى في موضوع الحروب we need to think about a concept we call the alternative facility sites. The alternative facility sites عندها مستويات وتقسيمات كثيرة، فأنت بتختار أولا البدائل التي ترتبط بنطاق الخدمة. So basically if you have a class that's being closed for maintenance, then that should be your priority. نفتح الكلاس اللي مغلق للصيانة ونستفيد منه إذا كان ما يتأثر بالسيناريو اللي موجود عندنا في الريسك بروفايل. بعد ذاك بدائل المواقع التعليمية اللي هو الالترناتيف فاسيلتي سايت اللي هي بنسميها unusual educational sites. The unusual educational sites معناتها أنت بتستخدم حاجة في نفس إطار الكلية أو الجامعة أو المستشفى أو whatever، لكن ما مستخدمة في عملية تعليمية. فمن الأسهل إنه نحن نستخدمها في العملية التعليمية، وبنسمي الكونسيبت ده the repurposing concept. والrepurposing concept دي مش فقط للالترناتيف فاسيلتي سايتس، لا حتى بنستخدمه في مستوى اللي هو الفاكولتي ستاف، حتى على مستوى الفاكولتي. كيف الحكايه دي؟ على سبيل المثال في كوفيد 19 عملنا repurposing to make use of some particular specialties to be used في الانتنسيف كريتيكال setting لانه كان في حاجه لهذا الموضوع. So basically we have a fast track training for anesthesiologists, internal medicine staff, etc. To be to work in the critical care setting. same applies to same applies للفاكولتي in the university. انه the faculty in the university انه والله يا اخي نحن حنستفيد من اساتذه الجامعه في تخصصات معينه لتغطيه مناهج اضافيه او بعض البرامج الاضافيه داخل العمليه التعليميه. So the plan should outline how we relocate these resources. Now, it's very important to think about the training and drills. It's very important. It's not only essential to prepare our staff and students for a swift response, but it ensures that when the plan is activated, everyone knows exactly the role and how to execute it effectively. And as we progress, we will explore how to maintain the academic rigor and the clinical excellence, if you would, that our health profession programs are known for, even in the face of the unexpected events. So I invite you all, please, I invite you all to consider how these activation protocols would be and unfold in your departments and your personal settings. So the summary of this slide, having the objective there, you need to have a criteria of activation, and you have to have clear protocols to be activated, because it's not none, all or none. You should activate as of the need, whether it's a site or even technology or even supplies as we go. So I'll check now for if we have questions to answer, to take a couple of questions before we proceed. So any questions so far? All right, so there's a question that around the whether these plans has deadlines or not. Yes, that's part of the protocol. So basically, when you have a plan, you need to have an activation plan. You need to have an execution timeline, and you need to have a deadline for each protocol. And from that point, in a moment, we are going to discuss the concept of deactivation and escalation in the execution of education continuity plan. All right, as there's no further question, I'll probably go back to the presentation. Yeah, so now let's talk about the continuity plan. Exactly how does that how that be reflected in our document, and how it looks, and what exactly is expected to be implemented. So now we're talking about the tactics. All right. So having a plan is one thing, but executing it successfully is where the real challenge lies, actually. So in health profession education, precisely, we must be very precise about how we implement our continuity strategies to ensure minimum disruption to our critical teaching and clinical activities. So for each scenario identified in our educational impact analysis, or the business impact analysis for the institute, that requires a tailored response, meaning that this should involve setting clear response objective, delineating the specific actions, assigning responsible parties for each action. And we need also to consider a scenario where we must transition to remote instruction due to a public health crisis. And we have an example in COVID-19 for that. The continuity plan would outline also the steps, such as activating online learning platform, reassigning teaching responsibilities, to available faculty, and also communicating changes to students. What do you have now? What are the updates or the amendments in the curriculum? All of these should be part of the protocol. So there's a lot of examples. I don't want to go into specifics on that. However, I would like to precise in one in the important tactics, which is we need to have some sort of there's a concept نحن بنسميه the operational period, which in how linked to the question in the Q&A about the deadline. في اي تفعيل لبروتوكول خطه استمراريه العمليه التعليميه في حاجه بنسميها نحن الاوبريشنال بيريود. الاوبريشنال بيريود دي فكرتها الاساسيه انه كل مؤسسه يجب ان تضع اوقات محدده لتنفيذ الاهداف التي يجب ان تطبق في عمليه استمراريه عمليه التعليم. So you don't keep it open. ليه we don't keep it open؟ لانه في النهايه حيحصل ايه؟ staff fatigue. ويمكن شفنا الحكايه دي في كوفيد 19 ريسبونس في كل المستويات في كل الانستتيوشنز الا من رحم الله. لكن الفكره الاساسيه انه the concept of operational period is very important for each action to be implemented and it should be clearly defined. والوقت كذلك ما بيسع انه نتناوله بالتفصيل how we do this in place. لكن probably we'll have the chance to address it somehow in some of our activities, next activities inshallah. So as we prepare now to define the specifics of continuity plan, we need to consider how these steps apply to your department. Think about it, how you can implement this into your institute, etc. لو لاحظت الان في الجدول دي اخذت القالب دي الفكره الاساسيه انت عملت سيناريو. So we have a scenario. اخذنا السيناريو دي الفكره الاساسيه انه عايز في خطتك تقول انه if this scenario happen شنو الاهداف اللي انا عايز احققها لاستمرار عمليه التعليم اذا صار هذا السيناريو. ويبقى انت تضع 10 objectives 5 objectives 3 objectives هدفين. It depends exactly in your context. وبالتالي حتقول اوكي my first objective والله اذا حصل والله war that affects our education activity. مثلا حصل خطر هجوم او هجوم فعلي مثلا على موقع جامعي مثلا، انا اقول والله اهدافي هنا انه على اساس يحصل continuity في education اول حاجه والله يا اخي to continue والله lectures online. والله ال unaffected areas مثلا السكيلز تريننج اذا كانت خارجه من الكامبس هنا خلاص دي تستمر. بعد ذاك الاوبجكتيفز دي بتحولها لاكشنز. عشان كده كل اوبجكتيف you see in the table there is A1 A2 A3. وبعد ما تقول A1 A2 A3 دي الاكشنز اللي انت حتحقق بها الهدف دي في حال حصل السيناريو او التريجر اللي موجود فوق في التيبل دي. هنا يجب ان تحدد كمان who's responsible of it. الريسبونسبل دي للاكشن يعني R1 هو responsible for action A1. بس هو مين بالضبط؟ هو حتجيبه من الهيكل التنظيمي اللي انت وضعته فوق. alright؟ فحنقول والله يا اخي بالنسبه لرئيس قسم كده هو مسؤول من تنفيذ والله محاضرات السيرجري على البلاتفورم اونلاين started from day كده to day كده we ensure this up and running within كده. within كده دي بنسميها الاوبريشنال بيريود particularly for this action. عشان كده والله بنقول الهدف الاول فيه 3 اكشن، اكشن 1 اكشن 2 اكشن 3. اكشن 1 في responsible 1 and 2. بعد ذاك responsibility الاكشن الاولى المفروض تخلص في ساعه، الاكشن الثانيه في نص ساعه، الاكشن الثالثه خلال اسبوع، الاكشن الرابع خلال كذا. الهدف الثاني الاكشن الاولى كذا، الاكشن الثاني كذا وهكذا. who's responsible what is the deadline for the activity. مجموع الحاجات اللي شايفها في الكولوم اللي موجوده في التايم كولوم هنا دي كلها ان الصم بيسميها الاوبريشنال بيريود. دي منو اللي بيحددها الاديوكيشن كونتينيتي بلان ليدر، مدير الجامعه، عميد الكليه. بيقولوا يا اخوان لازم ننفذ البروتوكول التالي في خطه استمراريه عمليه التعليم خلال يوم. اليوم ده هو عباره عن الاطار الزمني لتنفيذ هذه الاهداف. وبالتالي كل واحد من الفريق لا يمكن يضع اكشن وينفذها في اكثر من الاوبريشن بيريود اللي حددها مدير الجامعه او عميد الكليه. يعني مثلا ما ممكن اقول اكشن نمبر 1 فور اوبجكتيف نمبر 1 بتتنفذ في يومين، وهي الاوبريشنال بيريود كلها 24 ساعه. So this is very important to be considered as you plan for your education continuity, and we need to practice this as we go. طيب, the ultimate goal during any emergency in our field is to return to our core mission. So educating and health profession education as usual, اللي نحن بنسميه going back to normal. And the scientific term of that is the recovery. So the recovery phase is about stabilizing our operations and ensuring the availability of the essential resources such as the classrooms, the clinical training sites, the learning materials are there. So our recovery efforts are driven by several factors, which include reestablishing our mission essential functions, securing the necessary supplies and equipment for education, and evaluating our manpower needs. So basically, كل resources لما ترجع لوضعها الطبيعي, here and only here we need to talk that we are starting going back to normal, or the start of the recovery phase. يعني الريكفري phase ده ما معناته المشكله انتهت، معناته انه والله نحن we starting to think about implementing actions within the concept of recovery. وبelieve it or not, it's not that يعني من النواحي المهمله it's not that easy. Why؟ لان هي ما في منظارنا كinstitutions. عشان كده it's very important to عفوا to decide to mobilize the resources for continuity education. لكن متى نوقف ومتى نرجع عادة القرار ده بياخد وقت. وليه بياخد وقت؟ لأنه عادة ما بيدرج في خطط استمرارية الأعمال أو خطط الجامعات لتقديم لاستمرار عملية تعليمية. الفكرة الأساسية إنه you also need to consider when you back to normal, going back to normal. عشان كده يمكن بتسمعوا after COVID-19 the concept of the 3 B's, building back better. building back better exactly انه نستفيد من التجربه والديسربشن اللي صارت دي في بناء عمليه تعليميه افضل، في بناء رعايه صحيه افضل، في كذا وكذا وكذا الى اخره. All right. So we cannot talk about recovery or going back to normal without discussing the concept of performance management or key performance indicators, if you would. The KPIs are very vital during this phase. Why is that? Because it provides us with a quantifiable measure to assess the recovery programs. So for instance, in health professional education setting, these could include the percentage of courses successfully transitioned back in personal format or clinical rotation fully operational. So basically, having these preset key performance indicators with a baseline هتساعدك انت في الجامعه في تحديد متى ارجع للوضع الطبيعي. لانه في النهايه عشان يكون الموضوع ما subjective لازم يكون عندنا very objective way، وما حيكون عندنا طريقه very objective الا اذا كان عندنا indicators، وما حيكون عندنا more efficient way الا يكون عندنا key performance indicators. عشان كده I highly recommend انه to put the particular KPIs as part of your educational continuity plan، لانه حتساعدك انه through the education process you will have a baseline for these predefined KPIs. وبالتالي لما انا اقول انا ابدا ارجع للوضع الطبيعي خلاص حقدر اعرف in comparison to that baseline. طيب نفترض انه والله الموضوع ده الاكشنز ما تمت في وقتها، والله things exacerbating, objectives not fulfilled, action not fulfilled. هنا بيحصل حاجه بنسميها الاسكليشن. الاسكليشن دي the escalation process is not بالمفهوم التقليدي يعني shaming and naming if you would. No, the case is that if you are not able as a responsible to execute the designated action for you as part of the education continuity plan, then probably you need a support. So this support should go to the higher authority to provide the needed support as part of the education continuity planning process. So basically عشان كده في الهيكلة التنظيمية للاستجابة للدisruptions داخل الجامعات they should be what we call the planning section chief within the incident command system. The planning section chief or the planning section unit, those are, if you would, the officers of watching the incident action plan that we are implementing as part of the emergency response of the institute and in the implementation of the education continuity plan. So basically, if an action not happened within the designated period, the timeline, then it needs to be escalated to provide the support. It's not like shaming and naming, and that's very important because it will be faced by the challenge of the culture. دائما ما يفهم التصعيد بنظرة سلبية، وإنما التصعيد هنا المقصود به إنه you call for support rather than أصعد المشكلة لمجرد التصعيد. الفكرة الأساسية إنه هنا في action ما تمت، الأكشن دي needs to be continued or supported by someone عنده صلاحية أو يحتاج لدعم محدد. Now, the frequency of reporting on this KPI, it will vary for sure. And that will be based on the nature of the emergency, the pace of the recovery, and the target should be here realistic, reflecting both the urgency of resuming the operations of health professional education and the practicalities of the situation itself. So please, as we finalize this, the recovery plan is very important. Please always consider to have a key performance indicators in your education continuity plan, because this will reflect the institutional goals to resume to normal educational activities. وطبعا زي ما قلت لكم المسألة ليست بهذه دائما بيواجه الانستتيوشن صعوبة، باعتبار انه هو ما جزء عاده من ثقافه استمراريه العمليه التعليميه، وعاده ما ينظر لموضوع التعافي والعوده للوضع الطبيعي في العمليه التعليميه كشكل اساسي من الاوفر اول بروسيس، لكن دائما ما بيكون التركيز على الاستجابه للمشكله، انه والله there is a problem now, what we should do now. وبالتالي the idea here is we need to think about the 360 concept of education continuity planning rather than being reactive. Again, I will pause here for a moment to see exactly. If you have any question, please don't hesitate to post in the chat or raise your hand. All right, to not get fatigued, we have to prioritize the objective as we can't reach all objective at regular work without crisis. Yes, indeed. Indeed. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, Q&A. No questions. Okay, perfect. Going back to the presentation. Now, that's one important point as well. As we have now the document ready, education continuity plan, as part of a business continuity plan, then before we can proceed with the implementation of our continuity plan, it's imperative that we obtain a formal approval from the highest authority within our education institution. And this is step for sure underscores the plan's legitimacy. And of course, it ensures the organization buy-in. So if it's been approved by the highest authority, then there will be most probably more buy-in from the faculty and the students as well. So the head of the institution, for instance, the dean of the medical school, the president of the university, it plays a crucial role in the process. So their approval is not just formality; it's testament to the plan's alignment with the institution values and goals for training and health professional education. So that's why we need to consider it after having all these efforts in one place in a document. It should go through the approval process from the highest part in the authority. And now, prior to granting the approval, it's expected that the plan undergo through reviews. It should be reviewed, whether through the content of the process. And it might include assessment by legal teams or financial officers within the university. or even other stakeholders. The idea is to ensure that the countercurrent parts of the plan, ASP plan, is feasible, compliant with regulation, whether financially or legally. So the approval also means that we are ensuring that the plan complies with the accreditability standards of the university and the quality and the accreditation process standards for health professional education. And that's, of course, means that it's ready to be communicated and disseminated across the institution. And once approved, we can initiate the next step of the critical phases. That means we can train the stakeholders. We can train them based on the rules that been established in this document to ensure that everyone is prepared to act when necessary, of course. And uh, then we will discuss the next step. When you train, that's not the end of the story, but there's still actions to be done. What are these actions? With the formal approval secured, we need to have some sort of preparedness activities. As you recall, in the earlier slides, I talked about the preparedness cycle. And that is, of course, is started by the approval dissemination and then the effective training. The effective training, of course, is the foundation of the preparedness. It's essential to educate the stakeholders, not just the faculty and the staff, but also the students on their roles within the education continuity planning. So the training should be comprehensive. It covers everything from how we respond to the disruption itself and how we maintain the educational activities as planned in the education continuity plan. And of course, it needs to be disseminated across all the institution, and they need to be aware that we have an education continuity plan on hand. So you cannot have a plan without considering the monitoring and the evaluation process, which is key to understand the plan's effectiveness. So this is typically done through exercises, simulation exercises. And there's a concept we call the building block approach, which is basically that you implement some sort of exercises, but depends on the setting of the university or the faculty or even the healthcare facility and the needs. So you implement the scenarios for within the education continuity plan as part of the exercise and the drill, and there's a huge amount of tactics that can be addressed and implemented in that sense. Now, as we move forward with this post-approval step, let's consider how we can best tailor the training, the evaluation to our unique need of our institution. That's very important. So it's not, again, a one size fits everyone. So please consider tailoring all this to your institution, needs. طيب. Any questions so far? Okay, brilliant. So the last part of our talk today, احنا تكلمنا الآن على overall education continuity plan. الآن عايزين نشوف بعض التكنيكس for risk assessment، لأنه هو ده الفارق حقيقة. يعني اللي يفرق إنه أنت كيف تعرف الإشكاليات فين، وين المخاطر، وين السيناريوهات اللي أنت عبرها حتنفذ خطة استمرارية الأعمال. So I'm giving you a couple of words on that regard. وإن شاء الله تعالى وإن شاء الله تعالى أديكم بعض التولز إن شاء الله, and we'll do a quick exercise together. So let me take a couple of questions before I go. All right. طيب. In the Q&A, there is a question. how was the student assessment rubric designed based on an existing model or a new one? There's a question from Sivan. So can you clarify your question a little bit, Dr. Sivan? So what do you mean? How was the student assessment rubric designed? Can you just clarify your question? And definitely gonna get back to you to answer your question. Thank you very much. Okay, let me see the chat. Okay, monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning, and continue improving to the plan. Absolutely, yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. Okay, go to presentation. Brilliant. So, I'll start by some important definitions first. Bismillah. So, as educators, or all in the health professional education field, whether we are educators or administrators in the health profession context, we need to understand some of the essential of the risk. We're not just talking about the potential hazards in a lab or in a clinic or in the ward or in the OR, but we're talking here about any variable that might impede on our ability to teach or learn or even provide care in our healthcare setting. So when we say a hazard, the hazard for us could range from physical threat to the student, the faculty, such as the intangible threats like sudden change in accreditation requirements that could disrupt the program compliance, right? And that also might include some of the physical hazards as well. So that's very important to address here, to know exactly what do we mean by hazard. So if you draw your attention to this drawing, that gives you a precise definition of the interactions between the concept of hazards and exposure and relation to risk. Now, though our exposure is directly related to how much our daily operations in the classrooms, the clinics, or even the online platform at risk from these hazards. So it's about how often and how deeply these potential issues might affect our education delivery. So in our world, risk is basically the probability that the hazards will actually impact our operation. And this could be, of course, the risk of losing clinical placement sites, which will be considered as vital for our students' hands-on training, or even risk of cyber attack that exposes the sensitive student data to jeopardy. Now, the vulnerability per se is basically the susceptibility of our institutions to this risk. So it's measure our preparedness and the ability to respond, and it's basically and it's basically answer to some questions. So whether we will have a higher or low impact to some particular scenarios or risk. Now, when we consider a hazard, exposure, or even vulnerability, so we are compiling a comprehensive picture of a risk we face in health profession education. So this holistic view is vital for creating a risk management strategy that protects the student, the faculty, and the staff, the education process, whether in the current status or even in the future. So having established a framework for understanding the risk, let's now explore exactly what can we do this now. الوضع الآن نحن نفهم جميعا من واقع مختلف مواقعكم ومقاماتكم حفظكم الله انه القضيه الان انه we need to identify those risks وايه البروفايل الخاص بالانستتيوشن اللي انا فيها. وفي ادوات كثيره لهذا الموضوع، لكن دي بتعتمد على الكونتكست حق الانستتيوشن اللي أنا فيها، سواء كان جامعه، كليه، قسم او اداره. وبالتالي زي ما قلت في بدايه الحديث نحن we cannot wait, we should start and we should start now. So in the realm of health profession education, the risk assessment هو ال cornerstone of ensuring a safe, effective learning environment. Our approach for identifying and managing those risks depend on the status of the registry of risk in place. يعني هل الانستتيوشن دي عندها ريسك ريجستري ولا ما عندها ريسك ريجستري؟ لو عندها ريسك ريجستري بعد ده في خطوات انا انصح انه نمشي فيها، ولو ما عندها ريسك ريجستري في خطوات ثانيه واتجاهات ثانيه كلها حطرحها لحضراتكم واديكم الادوات اللي تساعد على كده بحيث انه نحن نمشي لقدام. Right? So for institutions that don't yet have a risk registry, the journey begins with establishing a systematic process. And I hear saying process because we need to identify the risk. Doing that, there's techniques such as brainstorming. You can do brainstorming. You can do Delphi method. There is a SWOT analysis, and that can be very useful and instrumental in identifying the issues. So these tools helps to consider a wide range of factors from clinical training, hazards, academic continuity challenges. لكن once the risk identified, then the next step is to develop اللي هو risk registry. So this living document will record the categories, identified risk, and then you will assign the ownership of the risk, and then you can track the status, and you can work, as I mentioned earlier, on the mitigation process. So basically, it serves as a centralized tool for monitoring the risk landscape over time. Now, for schools or institutes that have a very solid or established risk registry, then they should continuously update this risk assessment process, and the latest data and the insights can be used and utilized with other tools like the risk matrix, the heat maps, or even more sophisticated softwares can help to quantify the risk. And يعني ده بيعتمد على ثقافة المخاطر في المؤسسة اللي نحن فيها، لأنه في النهاية وجوده بيدعم اللي هو مفهوم التخطيط لاستمرارية عملية التعليم. So regardless of the starting point, the goal that I would like to emphasize here is to embed the culture of continuous risk assessment within the institution. That means regularly review and update the risk registry, engage the stakeholders in the risk discussion, integrate the risk management in the decision-making process, and of course the educational continuity plan. يعني باختصار لو سألنا الآن الجامعات, let me here ask a question. So from the esteemed attendees, حضراتكم مين من المؤسسات أو الجامعات عندهم solid حاليا solid risk registry from the institution? Let me check here. نسأل الله السلامة للزملاء في مدني. شكرا دكتورة نوال، يعطيكم العافية وسلمكم الله إن شاء الله. في أي من الجهة من المؤسسات من المشاركين they have enterprise risk assessment process وفي solid risk registry? No? Let me check. Yeah, going back, chat. Okay. All right. So basically, الرسالة هنا إنه yeah, the starting point إنه نحن نبدأ مباشرة في هذه الامور وعندنا situation. الان انا I will stop sharing. I'm going to share once again. واحده من الادوات اللي هي بتساعدكم في تحليل المخاطر، وحشارككم اياها باذن الله تعالى. Okay. Okay, it goes. Yeah, brilliant. And, طيب, can you see my screen? Brilliant. طيب, perfect. So, yeah, where is it? Okay. طيب, the first tool I would like to introduce here that we call the hazard vulnerability analysis tool, and there's 2 versions on that. أنا ذكرت الآن إنه احتمالية المؤسسات اللي حضراتكم موجودين فيها بيعتمد على إنه هل فعلا في ريسك ريجستري موجود أو لا. الريسك ريجستري إن شاء الله تعالى إذا كان موجود then you can start from that point, you develop your risk profile. لكن نفترض إنه ما في ريسك، اللي ممكن نعمله شنو؟ أنا ذكرت بعض الأمثلة إنه في risk techniques, risk assessment techniques ممكن تعملها. So one of the tools that can be used إنه أنت تقوم تعمل brainstorming session, risk assessment workshop، وتدعي الناس المعنيين عشان يشاركوا في هذا الموضوع. الأداة دي بنسميها hazard vulnerability analysis tool. فكرتها الأساسية إنه بتحسب لك the relative risk for the institution، وقسمت الهازاردز بحيث إنه أنت تحدد بعد ذاك الريسك وفقا للتفاصيل المعلومات اللي أنت بتحطها، وقسمتها إلى natural hazards وأعطت أمثلة لها، وتكنولوجيكال hazards، وأدت human hazards، وأدت hazardous material أو الهازمات. وحناخذ نحن مثال فقط على موضوع let's say الناتشورال هازاردز او التكنولوجيكال، او خلينا let's say الناتشورال هازاردز for example. طبعا حتلقوا في الكولوم الاول كولوم A هنا في list of hazards، وطبعا دي it's not fixed، وبالتالي it's customizable وانت تقدر تحط فيها ما يناسب. يعني على سبيل المثال انا I cannot talk about tsunami in Sudan for instance، لكن في حاجات ثانيه ممكن تاثر على العمليه التعليميه، على زي شنو؟ زي الانترنال فلودز، الفيضانات الداخليه او الفيضانات الخارجيه، او الاوتبريكس او الابيديميكس. بعد ذاك الاداه دي كل اللي بتعمله you go للكاتيجوري اوف ذا هازارد، وبعدين بتكمل اللي هو الهازارد فولنربيلتي اناليسيس. بيحسب الريلاتيف ريسك ازاي؟ كل الفكره انه بعد ذاك انت بتحدد البروبابيلتي دي defined based on the likelihood. فكل ما كان فيه high likelihood, very high likelihood, moderate likelihood او not happen at all، هنا انت you define the score, you give it a score. So basically والله there's high likelihood انه الشيء ده يصير، so you give it the score of 3 right. بعدين بنجي للجزء الثاني. الجزء الثاني ده بيحسب السيفيريتي alright، بيحسب السيفيريتي. I will zoom out الجدول عشان يكون اوضح. Thank you. طيب بنحسب بعد ده كيف اللي هو بنحسب بعد ده كان احنا كيف الماجنتيود حقت السيفيريتي اوف الريسك. هي عباره عن الماجنتيود اوف ذا ريسك و minus الميتيجيشن strategies for the institute. وبالتالي في الخطر ده تحديدا let's say الهاروكين، انا حختار الفلودز هنا، سوري هنا الفلودز عشان تكون more relevant. اوكي فاختار الفلودز alright، وقلنا في high probability. طيب حكبر زياده كمان عشان يكون اوضح. اوكي طيب هاخد الفلوتس هنا انا بحدد البروبابيلتي في هاي probability انه والله تحصل فلوتس للمقر الجامعه. طيب بعدين بجي هنا للجزء ده، الكولوم ده هنا فيه ايه بقى؟ هنا انت بتشتغل على الجانب الخاص بالماجنتيود. لما نتكلم عن الماجنتيود قبلك اتكلمنا عن الاديوكيشن امباكت اناليسيس، هنا بنشوف الامباكت اوف ذا هازارد. في الامباكت اوف ذا هازارد الان الفلوت بتقوم بتشوف الهيومن امباكت، وبعد الهيومن امباكت دي in terms of injuries, in terms of possible injuries or deaths، بتقوم بتحدد الامباكت whether there is no impact or low impact or moderate impact or high impact. بعد ذاك الفيزيكال لوسز، الانفراستراكشر دامجز من الموضوع ده على الجامعه شنو، وبتديها سكور. والبزنس امباكت اللي هو الانتربشن اوف سيرفيس، يعني العمليه التعليميه دي حتتاثر الى اي مدى، اللي هو الماجنتيود اوف educational impact، وبتديها سكور. So basically كل ما كان في higher impact بيكون في high score. So let's say الفلوتس والله يا اخي ما في high impact on human، لكن والله في high impact على الانفراستراكشر، وعندنا high impact على السيرفيس لانه الستودنتس ما حيجوا وكذا. طيب نقطة مهمة جدا نسيت اذكرها، انه في الشيت نفسه التول في انستراكشنز في الانسترومنت بتلقوها في الصفحة الأولى اللي حشارككم إياها، وفي نفس الانسترومنت دي بتلقوا صفحة فيها ديفينيشنز. الديفينيشنز دي انت تستخدمها في doing الريسك assessment. So basically لما نخلص الامباكت على سبيل المثال البريبيرنس بارت اللي هو هنا right، so هتلقى فيه الانترنال ريسبونس الاكسترنال ريسبونس، وبعدين بيحسب لك الريلاتيف ريسك. So اول حاجه بيقول لك والله how prepared are you دي معناتها شنو؟ معناتها والله انا والله I have an education continuity plan في الجامعه، وانا highly prepared. لو ما عندي educational plan دي عندها سكور وهكذا. بعدين بنشوف الانترنال ريسبونس. الانترنال ريسبونس دي فكرتها شنو؟ الانترنال ريسبونس دي معناتها الجامعه او الكليه او المؤسسه is able to respond، تقدر تستجيب internally alright، عندها القدره الكامله للتعامل مع الديسربشن دي من غير اي تدخلات خارجيه او دعم خارجي. الاكسترنال ريسبونس معناتها شنو؟ معناتها انه في قادريه انه والله يا اخي لتنفيذ استجابه خارجيه، او الجامعه والانستتيوشن عندها القدره على او عندها MOUs او بروتوكولز بحيث انه تدعم الاستجابه او التعامل للانتربشنز اللي بتصير في education بروسيس. بعد كده بنجي نحن للبريبيرنس. لاحظوا هنا الكولوم الاخير، الفيلد الاخير اوتوماتيكلي كالكوليت الريلاتيف ريسك، وهشرح لكم what does that mean exactly. فهنا نجي للجانب الثاني. سو الجانب الاول ده نحن بنتكلم على الامباكت، والفيلد الكولوم الاول هنا البروبابيلتي الاحتماليه للموضوع ده، وهنا نجي نحن بنتكلم على اللي هو البريبيرنس. دي هذا بلان والله نحن كجامعه ككليه طب ككليه صيدله، والله احنا للفيضانات دي ما عندنا خطه لاستمرار عمليه التعليم. So we don't have a plan actually. So we don't have a plan. دي عندها سكور زي ما شايفين هنا السكورز فوق، يقول لك والله يا اخي are you highly prepared, moderately prepared, low preparedness or no preparedness at all. على سبيل المثال ما عندنا خطه لكن عندنا لجنه. طيب عندكم لجنه والله we are low prepared، خلاص we are moderately او we are low prepared، فنحن نديها سكور 2 مثلا. alright. بعدين نجي نشوف والله الانترنال ريسبونس. do we have a capacity to respond كجامعه للتعامل مع الديسربشن دي واستمرار عمليه التعليم. if we don't have a capacity then we are not that prepared for it. اذا كان عندنا capacity then بيكون السكور اقل. لكن عندنا MOUs والله مع جامعه اكس انه يساعدونا في كذا وكذا وكذا، او نحن ذاتنا we can provide يعني زي ما بيقولوا we provide support for disruptions to others, and that means في external response we have this field. فهنا بيحسب لك اوتوماتيكلي ويقول لك الريلاتيف ريسك equals 72%. relative risk معناته شنو؟ relative risk انه حنشوف نحن والله البروبابيلتي multiplied by severity تدينا relative risk. الريلاتيف ريسك دي categorized في النموذج دي. تمشي هنا للصفحه الاخيره واجين انا I will share الدوكيمنت اللي هو في السمري، فبتلقى اوريدي الدوكيمنت بيحسب لك المساله دي في كل نوع من الهازارد، بيقول لك والله الريلاتيف ريسك بالنسبه لك للهازارد دي هو كذا. then from that point you need to plan for الحكايه دي as you go. طيب فهنا ده مثال للناتشورال هازارد، وقلنا ده لناس مثلا ما عندهم ريسك ريجستري. حتجمع الناس كل الستيك هولدرز في التيم عشان نعمل والله يا اخي ريسك اسسمنت ورك شوب on that regard. let's assume انه والله الحكايه دي ما وفي سترونج ريسك ريجستري. السترونج ريسك ريجستري ده ليس بالضروره يكون في نفس القالب، لكن نفس الناس دي عملوا ايفولوشن للموضوع ده وطوروه بحيث انه يكون حاجه بنسميها incident based risk registry. incident based risk registry allow me to share the other tool. Okay, let's hold on. Okay, so incident based risk registry meaning what? meaning انه allow me to share the other one. معناته انت مسجل كل موضوع البروبابيلتي دي. حليناها نحلها ازاي؟ نحلها بانه والله انه انا بيكون عندي very strong risk registry وانا عارف بالضبط الحكايه ما سبجكتيف. يعني مثلا اللي بيصير انه لما يكون ما في ريسك ريجستري بنعتمد نحن على اللي هو خبرات من هم موجودين في المؤسسه التعليميه عشان نعمل هذا الاجراء. لكن on the other hand لما يكون عندنا strong registry مشكله التيرن اوفر في الفاكولتي ما حتاثر علينا. meaning what? meaning انه خلاص this is the registry عفوا we can use it to do risk profile للuniversity and by that خلاص الحكايه ما حتكون subjective. in that sense I will share الان الدوكيمنت الثاني وبرضه حارسله لكم على اساس انه to show exactly how this is useful. all right, share the screen. Please confirm that you see my screen. Can you see the screen? طيب. Okay, I'll zoom out to be more clear. Enable content. طيب برضو الأداة دي أنا هرسلها لكم إن شاء الله to use it. الفكرة الأساسية إنه الريسك ريجستري هنا نفس الدوكيمنت عدلوا فيه شنو بقى؟ عدلوا فيه إنه كل اللي حتعمله تجي تحط اسم الانستيتيوت وتحط تفاصيل الانستيتيوت والمؤسسة، وعندك حاجة هنا اسمها الانسيدنت لوج. So I'll zoom out عشان تكون واضحة للجميع. الانسيدنت لوج الفكرة الأساسية إنه أنت بتسجل معلومات، المعلومات دي بتساعدك انه تنعكس هنا في موضوع البروبابيلتي. البروبابيلتي وين؟ البروبابيلتي بتتعكس هنا. سو بيزيكلي خلاص انا لما والله يكون عندي الموضوع اللي مسجل عندي بيزيكلي انسيدنت ترتبط والله يا اخي باضراب العمال في الكليه او عمال المشرحه مثلا على سبيل المثال، او عمال المختبر مثلا، او عمال اللاب. سو بيزيكلي الفكره انها كلها انه موضوع البروبابيلتي هنا حيتبني وفقا للريسك ريجستري اللي هو اوريدي موجود ومتاح، حيكون في سجل الاحداث مسجله عندك اللي هو column B. So basically all be reflected هنا، وبيساعدك الموضوع جدا. ليه؟ لانه حتكون from column C and column D عارف بالضبط how many alerts happen، كم مشكله حصلت فيما يتعلق بالهازردز دي، وكم مره انا عملت اكتيفيشن لفريق استجابه الطوارئ او فريق تنفيذ خطه استمراريه الاعمال خلال خلال الجامعه. right now بعد كده الباقي بيمشي بنفس الطريقه. so basically لو اتكلمنا والله يا اخي اتكلمنا مثلا infectious disease outbreak مثلا على سبيل المثال، probability والله high probability. بعدين والله ما سجلت، لاحظ هنا قال لك على طول 0 0 0 0. ليش؟ لانه الانسيدنت لوج هنا انا ما سجلت شيء. right so لما يكون في تسجيل يعني حصل outbreaks في الجامعه لا سمح الله، هنا immediately it will be reflected لهذا vulnerability analysis tool. right so basically لو كان في شيء مسجل بيتعكس هنا، بس for the sake of time we'll go directly and give you some time to practice. بعدين موضوع الامباكت عشان نحسب السيفيريتي واللي هي عباره عن magnitude minus mitigation بنفس الطريقه وبنفس الديفينيشن. لما نخلص الحكايه دي you finalize it. مثلا لموضوع الاوتبريك let's say we have high human impact for sure على الفاكولتي وعلى الستودنت، لكن ما عندنا infrastructure impact وسيرفيس طبعا will be interrupted. لو اخذنا في الاعتبار موضوع مثلا كوفيد 19 والديسربشنز اللي عملها في العمليه التعليميه على سبيل المثال. وبعدين موضوع البريبيرنس we don't have a plan for that. if we have a plan خلاص، لكن if we don't have a plan خلاص we don't have a plan and we are not able, we don't have an education continuity plan, we don't able to respond outside, and we don't have external support or even external capacity of support or MOUs to support that. So basically الفكرة الأساسية هي بيحسب لك الريلاتيف ريسك اللي هو في الكولوم الأخير زي ما أنتم شايفين 53%. What does that mean؟ قسموها في هذا النموذج إنه أي حاجة الريلاتيف ريسك فيها أقل من 25% دي بتعتبر لو ريسك. تعتبر لو ريسك معناتها ما أولوياتك كمؤسسة تعليمية تفكر في ال education continuity plan لها. لو كانت من 25 26 وانت الى 50 that gives you اللي هو موضوع انها تمشي الى moderate، وبعد ذاك من 50 الى 75 that's high، ومن 75 الى 100 that's very high risk. وده هو اولوياتك، ده اولوياتك في الموضوع. meaning انه والله يا اخي انت تركز عليه جدا في موضوع عمليه التعليم وتضع خطه وبروتوكولات، لانه في الغالب السيناريو ده يصير في الشهر الجاي، الشهرين الجايين، 3 شهور الجايات وهكذا، لانه it has a very high probability وعندها very high impact وما عندنا لها high preparedness. فالوقت ده معناته انه ده اولوياتك for education continuity وهكذا، وتبدا تشتغل على هذا الاساس تخطط لها. طيب دي الاداه الثانيه ميزتها عفوا ميزه الاداه دي انه خلاص انت الان في مؤسسه اي حاجه تحصل يو ريجستري. once you register it حتحل مشكله انه والله يا اخي عندنا حتحل مشكله انه والله في high turnover it's not feasible to conduct اللي هو risk assessment workshop or brainstorming وهكذا. فدي القضيه الثانيه، ودي اداه ممكن تستخدم very useful. HVA has a vulnerability analysis by Casa Permanente، فيمكن استخدامها وهي modifiable، يعني انت الان you can customize الحكايه دي الاخر. عشان كده في النهايه هنا بتلقى في empty space موجوده على اساس انه تضع فيها الحاجه اللي انت عايز تضعها من الهازارد ليست، او حتى تكستمايز الحاجه اللي موجوده هنا لو هي ما كانت مفيده. في بعض القوالب اللي حتلقوها اونلاين حتى حاطين لك هنا زومبي يعني عايز يقول لك اللي هو planning for hazard X، يعني حتى لو الزومبيز كانوا one of the الخيارات consider it. يعني الفكره الرساله اللي عايزين يقولوها انه يا اخي plan for the unexpected في الموضوع ده and consider and tailor your risk accordingly. في تجربه فريده طبقت هنا في المملكه العربيه السعوديه اللي هي بنسميها الاي اس بي ار. allow me برضه تشير السكرين، لكن فكرتها بتعتمد بنفس الطريقه اللي هو الاي اس بي ار stands for Incident Severity Preparedness Ratio. Incident Severity Preparedness Ratio. I'm going to share السكرين الان. Hold on. Incident Severity. Yeah. Can you see my screen, please? All good. So Incident Severity Preparedness Ratio or ISPR فكرته الأساسية بنفس الطريقة، هو ده عبارة عن ريشيو، فهو عايز دي أداة بتحدد بالضبط تحسب الريشيو ما بين السيفيريتي وما بين البريبيرنس efforts. عفوا. So basically you put your institute here وتكتب اسم الانستيتيوت وبعدين تصنيفات الاخطار زي ما نحن عرفناها، ونوع الخطر هو ايه، الهازارد ديتيل. بعد ذاك البروبابيلتي دي من واقع ما هو حاصل، يعني هل الهازارد دي، الخطر دي او السيناريو دي صاير فعليا ولا لا؟ صاير فعليا عندها سكور، فبتقول والله درجه الاحتماليه كده من واقع الريجستر اللي موجود، ووضع الخطر دي running active or inactive، يعني حاليا في armed conflict this is running، دي بتاخد سكور. بعد ذاك درجه التاثير بتاخد سكور. كل المجموعه دي تقارن بالاستعداد. هل نحن عندنا خطه لاستمراريه عمليه تعليميه؟ هل مدربين عليها؟ هل عندنا تجهيزات مناسبه في البنى التحتيه؟ هل عندنا ستاف فاكولتي جاهزين لتنفيذها؟ فبنحسب الفرق ما بين، او بنعمل ريشيو، الاداه بتحسب الريشيو ما بين السيفيريتي والبريبيرنس، وبيقول لك والله اذا كانت الريشيو less than 0.75 then we are in a good shape, that's not a priority. والله اذا كانت between 0.75 to 1 now هنا عندنا ريسك، واذا كانت اكثر من واحد that's high risk. What does that mean؟ كل الفكره معناتها كل ما زادت شده الخطر اللي هي تفسر من واقع الاحتماليه وضع الخطر ودرجه التاثير مقارنه بتجهيزك له كانستيتيوت، هنا ده بيوديك في انه what is the current risk on that regard. فده واحده من الكونسبتس اللي نفذت كذلك هنا in Saudi Arabia، لكن ترتبط بنفس المفهوم. It's not different من الكونسبت اوف الهازارد vulnerability analysis، لانه في النهايه نحن الموضوع كله عندنا احتماليه لخطر معين او سيناريو معين وعنده اثار. طيب الخطر ده انا اللي بقدر اعمله يا اما انا امنعه لو بتمنع، يا اما والله خلاص اذا كان inevitable اقلل الاثر منه. العمليه دي اللي هي الميتيجيشن استراتيجيز. طيب الميتيجيشن استراتيجي دي بعملها انا كيف بقى؟ just give me one moment to open a document. هديكم برضو فيه مثال سريع على اساس انه give you an example of التولز اللي بتستخدم في هذا الصدد. all right. brilliant. طيب so I will share the screen once again. طيب قبل اتكلمنا على والله يا اخي الاسينشال فانكشنز بحددها كيف، ودينا امثله للنماذج اللي موجوده في البرزنتيشن، لكن to put this in practice اديكم مثال بسيط. مثلا مثلا والله تدريب طلاب الامتياز على سبيل المثال. alright، فبتقوم بتجي تحدد الحكايه دي انت كمؤسسه، بتقول الوظيفه دي اساسيه، يعني لو حصل السيناريو ده عايز المهمه دي تستمر ولا لا. محاضرات الجراحه، اللاب، الكذا، بتحدد يو ليست كل الميشنز او الفانكشنز بتذكرها، وبعدين بتحدد انها هي essential or not essential. alright، والله تقول essential خلاص يمشي معك meaning انه you cannot do everything during emergency، فده اولويه يمشي معك. alright. طيب essential من ياتو ناحيه، من ناحيه شنو؟ يستمر معك من ياتو ناحيه، يستمر معك بموقعه الحالي في العمليه التعليميه بنفس القوه العامله بادواته بانظمته وهكذا. فاهمني؟ يعني انت you put here you add في column G اي مسار اضافي تراه مناسب. يعني مثلا انا اقول والله تدريب طلاب الامتياز. طيب تدريب طلاب الامتياز انا احتاج عمليه تدريب طلاب الامتياز تستمر بالمستشفيات الحاليه ما تتغير. اوكي so I'll put a label it انه والله انا عايزها تستمر يعني. alright. بعدين تقول والله يا اخي في مسار خاص بالقوى العامله عمليه الامتياز لازم يفعل في الموضوع meaning والله انا احتاج الاستاف and more so I need to plan للمساله دي من ناحيه staff. والله في بعض الاكويبمنتس والتجهيزات والانفراستراكشرز needed to continue this part فانت بتحددها، وفي بعض البروتوكولات والسياسات التي يجب to be carry out او تضيف اي اشياء ثانيه right. فده مثال لانه how you do this and you apply plus انه you list بعدين المسارات هنا. بقول والله يا عناصر الخطه مثلا في موضوع تدريب الامتياز دي، طيب عندي بروتوكول خاص بالمواقع، عندي بروتوكول خاص بالقوى العامله، عندي بروتوكول خاص بالتجهيزات، عندي بروتوكول خاص بالاجراءات، عندي بروتوكول خاص بالدعم وهكذا. سو بيزيكلي بتحدد مساراتك لتنفيذ هذا البروتوكول meaning بعدين في الخطه بتقول والله يا اخي بموضوع تدريب الامتياز عايزين نفعل بروتوكول المواقع. ليه؟ لانه المواقع الحاليه لتدريب الامتياز انتربتد. طيب البروتوكول ده في الخطه موجود شنو؟ والله كاتبين انه والله الناس الديزيجنيتد لمستشفى A اذا حصل انتربشن في مستشفى A they should continue the work في مستشفى B او هكذا. So basically انت بتحدد هنا المسارات. alright. طيب الاورج ستراكشر زي ما قلت لكم قبل لازم تضعوه بنفس الطريقه دي. So when you see it I'm gonna again expand the view عشان تشوفوه اكثر. انه والله لازم قلنا لكل خطه لازم يكون هناك خطه لتنفيذ قائد لخطه تنفيذ استمراريه العمليه التعليميه. ممكن يكون مشرف، ممكن يكون نائب المدير، رئيس الجامعه، بس الفكره لازم يكون عندك اساسي باك اب and باك اب فور ذا باك اب. سو وفي كل مسار من المسار على سبيل المثال التقنيه والاتصالات technology communication then you need to have a leader and the leader يكون عنده باك اب and باك اب ويكون عندك team members وبعدين قائد فريق استمرار الاعمال او العمليه التعليميه اللي هم basically الديبارتمنتس هيدز او من ينوب عنهم ومن ينوب عنهم وعندهم الفريق اللي هم الفاكولتي right. بعدين السبورت فكرته الاساسيه كل ما يدعم تنفيذ الخطه دي من يقوده ومين الاستاف واي وظيفه اخرى any function هي اللي شايفينها في كولوم كي you can add to your structure whatever you need to make it happen. تعملها بنفس الطريقه دي right. كمان في بعض الاشياء اللي بتساعدك كمان حتى في الريسك اسسمنت عشان تضع السيناريو. نحن قبلك والله عرفنا المشكله وين، خلاص حددنا والله مثلا في اللاب في المختبر والله عندنا هاي ريسك alright. الريسك دي الكلاسيفيكيشن حقه والله it's considered from chemical spill في اللاب مثلا hazardous material alright. فبتقول السيناريو هنا ايه بقى؟ السيناريو هنا في column D is basically والله الكيميكال سبيل بيحصل ازاي؟ بنقول والله يا اخي مثلا في اثناء الفسيولوجي lab we are using some particular hazardous material واكسيدنتلي واحد من الطلاب او كذا او والله في labor dispute على سبيل المثال فبعض الليبرز jeopardized اللي هو الهازردس ماتيريال في المختبر. So you put the scenarios اللي ممكن تحصل للريسك دي عشان الاكسبوجر او السبيل. بعدين تجي هنا تحدد الميتيجيشن استراتيجيز. الميتيجيشن استراتيجيز زي ما قلنا whether it's structural or non structural. in case مثلا في موضوع الكيميكال سبيل في اللاب دي هازمات مثلا بقول والله انا بشتغل على structural. اول حاجه انه والله اللاب يكون اول حاجه equipped by fire safety. لازم تكون ال hazardous materials موجوده sealed في في warehouse، والwarehouse ده access only or authorized only by ال physiology department head او ال biochemistry department head او هكذا. وبعدين تحدد الاستراتيجيه الميتيجيشن استراتيجي ومين اللي مسؤول عنها، وليس بالضروره يكون المسؤول عنها موجود في الكليه باي ذا واي. وهنا يجي اهميه المالتي سيكتور coordination. So you need to plan to mitigate your risk whether they are inside the university, your institute, or outside the university on the institute. So basically بهذه الطريقه you put your plan. حددت كده الخطر، حددت السيناريو، حددت استراتيجيه الميتيجيشن استراتيجي ومين اللي مسؤول منها. حددنا والله مين ايه الكريتيكال فانكشنز اللي حتستمر اذا كان واحد من السيناريوز دي حصل. وبعدين حددنا والله انه حددنا بعديها كمان what exactly الامباكت حيكون في كل واحده and what the action would be اذا هذا صار. طيب the document كيف حيكون شكل الدوكيمنت دي؟ and again I'm going to show you one example of how the document might be. Very important to consider by the way the language. So basically اغلب institutions has both Arabic and non-Arabic speakers, all right? لكن ودي بتعتمد على اليونيفرسيتي بوليسي او الفاكولتي بوليسي. in essence انت الفكره الاساسيه من الدوكيمنت ما نعمل الدوكيمنت ونحطه يعني في الدرج، لكن it should be a reachable plan و practical plan والناس تبدا تنفذها. In that sense ممكن يتعامل باللغه العربيه واللغه الانجليزيه version that for those reading Arabic and English وحندربهم عليها. It's not the end of the story, right? So I'm going to show you an example of how you put that, how the document might look like. Yep. Okay. This is one example of one of the business continuity planning program we implemented here in Saudi Arabia. So basically تكويناته الأساسية ودي متطلبات من الجودة، مين المعد ومين سجل الإعداد ومين اللي غير في النسخة الأولى. النسخة الأولى ما فيها تغييرات، النسخة الثانية إذا كانت في تغييرات ف definitely will summarize the changes اللي صارت. بعدين مكان الاعتماد، سجل الاعتماد والصلاحية. الصلاحية ضرورية، يعني بنحط الديريشن والفاليديتي تايم، بيبدا من تاريخ كده وكذا. وبعدين بتحدد والله دي خطة استمرارية الأعمال، خطة استمرارية التعليم في إدارة كده أو في قسم كده، في قسم والله الفسيولوجي، في قسم الأناتومي. وبعدين يبوت الكونتنت وبعدين تجي هنا لبقية التفاصيل. والله يا أخي هنا الجزء الخاص بالتعريفات. الفكرة من التعريفات إنه في بعض الديبارتمنتس to implement an education continuity plan you need to have some technical terms and definitions. التكنيكال terms and definition دي considering the multi-sector coordination نحن تكلمنا على إنه في بعض الأشياء حتنفذ مش لحالك، حيكون معاك أشخاص ثانيين لكن they're not technical, they're not healthcare professionals, so they have a role in this. وبالتالي لازم نتفق على التعريفات اللي نحن عبرها هنضعها في الخطة و that's include the technical term that's used in this document. وبعديها بتيجي تحط الريسك بروفايل. الريسك بروفايل هدفه الأساسي قلنا نحدد أولوياتك. بعد ما بتلقى الريسك بروفايل بتلقى هنا أهداف الخطة، عناصر الخطة، الهيكل التنظيمي للخطة. بنمشي لقدام كمان you put هنا كل التنبيهات وتفعيل الخطة. Remember when I said you need to have حاجه نحن other term ممكن يقابلكم بنسميها triggers library. the triggers library معناتها شنو؟ الخطه بتاعت education continuity انا حفعلها لما يحصل شنو؟ لما تحصل incident ولا لما يحصل والله secondary infection، لما يحصل ايه. وكلنا شفنا البروتوكولز اللي في الجامعات طبقناها خلال COVID-19. when you have a secondary infection within the university that means والله يا اخي نحن نوقف القاعة ليوم كده، من يوم كده إلى يوم كده. we test everyone, we do كذا وبعدين we go back if 1 2 3. so we need to have what we call the triggers library على أساس إنه والله نقول خلاص activate مسار كذا في خطة استمرار العملية التعليمية. بعدين بتضع قائمه المهام الروتينيه والاساسيه. يعني انت قبل شفنا قبل شويه والله this is essential this is not essential. والله يا اخي الليكتشرز مثلا والله المحاضرات essential تستمر regardless. والله يا اخي في armed conflict حاليا والله اوكي بما انه والله السنترز ما موجوده كلها الان for training phase 1 we stop السكيلز training phase 2 نشتغل على virtual platform and high selective skills training to be implemented virtually. وهكذا يعني الفكره you list it over here which is essential and what is not essential. بعد كده انت هتعمل شنو؟ هتعمل زي ما وريتكم قبل في البرزنتيشن. تجي هنا تقول والله يا اخي انا هعمل شنو؟ سيناريو شنو؟ والله يا اخي حاله الحرب، حاله الحرب، سيناريو الحرب. تجي تقول والله يا اخي السيناريو ديت to respond to this scenario and making sure انه كل الامور ماشيه smoothly. ايه الاهداف اللي انا عايز احققها؟ فبتقول والله objective 1 objective 2 objective 3 and then action 1 action 2 action 3 who's responsible and what is the deadline for each and and what is the overall operation period. اي سيناريو identified في الeducation impact analysis لازم يكون موجود داخل خطه استمراريه العمليات التعليميه او خطه استمراريه الاعمال للجامعه. ليه؟ لانه this is basically that what you will respond for. فانت لازم تضع السيناريو and remember scenario X includes scenario X for education continuity planning. الحاجه الممكن ما تحصل او تكون بعيده it can happen, right? Things can happen. So always plan for the unexpected. وبعدين نجي والله يا اخي لحاجه مثال لها هنا this is very important. هنا انا حطيت الترم خطه التنفيذيه لانهيار النظام الصحي او انهيار العمليه التعليميه، ودي عندها تعريف. والتعريف حق الeducational system breakdown انه عنده مستويات. المستويات دي بتبدا على المستوى الوطني كامل السودان، والمستوى الثاني على مستوى الولائي على مستوى جامعات والمكونه للنظام التعليمي للممارسين الصحيين في هذه الولايه، والمستوى الثالث على مستوى الجامعه نفسها. وبالتالي خطه التعليم استمراريه التعليم يجب ان تضع في الاعتبار هذه المستويات. كل ده بنعمله عشان ما نصل لمفهوم انهيار عمليه التعليم الطبي او تعليم الممارسين الصحيين، لانه الاديوكيشن الهيلث بروفيشنال اديوكيشن بريك داون health professional education system breakdown إذا صار then that will be a problem. We'll need more resources and efforts to go back إن شاء الله to normal. وتكلمنا كمان على موضوع مؤشرات التعافي والعودة للوضع الطبيعي، فهنا لازم يكون عندنا مؤشرات. وبالتالي the way you put the KPIs you put the KPI لازم تحدد الunit of measure، لازم تحدد البيز لاين، لازم تحدد التارجت what is the target for that and the frequency of reporting. والله الموضوع ده المؤشر ده انا هقيسه كل 3 ساعات وانا بنفذ في خطه استمراريه العمليه التعليميه. كيف؟ لانه ده اللي هيحدد لي انه والله am I doing good am I doing bad am I starting to go into normal or not. وبالتالي لازم تضع هذه المؤشرات وتكون already predefined ومحدد الريبورتنج تايم فريم لها بشكل واضح ودقيق. بعد ذاك لازم تحدد والله طيب نحن everything that's activated needs to be deactivated. يعني ما حنكون نحن مستجيبين طول الوقت، لانه زي ما تكلمنا انه الفاتيج is one of the complications of اللي هو over responding. وبالتالي لازم كمان زي ما عندنا triggers library للاكتيفيشن وجود الكي بي ايز بيساعدنا تو دي اسكليت، لانه الفكره الاساسيه انه تنفيذ العمليات دي برضه بتحتاج لموارد، والريسورسز دي is not that simple that equals money that equals efforts that equals a lot of stuff. In that sense لازم نحدد بالضبط كيف نحن بنرجع how we de-escalate the plan how we go back to normal. دي كلها بنحددها، وطبعا صلاحياتها لازم تكون واضحه. لا تنسوا انه يكون في مرفقات. اي حاجه تدعم تنفيذ خطه استمراريه التعليم تعليم الممارسين الصحيين لازم to be here. على سبيل المثال لو عندك فيندرز معينين لخدمه محدده مثلا او سيرفيس محدده في المستشفى، النمبرز، الكونتاكت انفورميشن، حتى الاكتيفيشن كودز للجامعه، كل الحاجات دي انت بتضيفها في هذا النموذج. Now lastly في حاجه ومفهوم مهم جدا بالمناسبه، وكثير من الناس يعني ما بيضعوه في الاعتبار، اللي هو نحن بنسميها الفاميلي كونتينيوتي بلان او الانديفيدوال كونتينيوتي بلان. وده ما حب للنفس بقدر ما انه you're part of a community، وبالتالي العائله من احب ما هي لدينا، وبالتالي you need to plan for the continuity of the family activities in order انه نطمن انه العمليه التعليميه حتستمر، لانه تاثير الاسره عليك وتاثير ما هم اعزاء لنا حيأثر على استمرار عمليات تعليميه. And that's not only in education by the way، حتى during COVID-19 نحن for example في تنفيذنا لبرنامج استمراريه اللي هو الاعمال اللي نفذناه during COVID-19، نحن requested انه يكون في family continuity plan لكل الناس اللي موجودين في الهيكل التنظيمي لخطه استمراريه العمليات، لانه وجود هذه البلان حيضمن انه their family are safe، we are safe، وهو بالتالي mentally committed او available to us من غير ما يكون في اي اشكاليات. Honestly speaking I was planning انه يكون عندنا practical session، لكن we are out of time، وانا حابب في الفتره الاخيره I leave the floor for participants if they have questions to address and discuss. لكن I will share كل هذه الدوكيمنت. I have two scenarios and just give me a moment to share one of them على اساس انه if you have the chance during the day to practice او عن طريق الزملاء في الانستتيوشنز to practice exactly what happened if this scenario occurs، وكيف نطبق الاشياء دي. So I'm going to share with you those, but just allow me to show you an example of a scenario. Share. Window. Oh, okay. Where is it? Sorry, yeah, just one moment. Perfect. Okay, yeah. So I was planning to have some sort of interaction on group work. So this is a case scenario. I'll be sharing 3 of them. الفكرة الأساسية إنه I put a background context and a scenario for educational continuity planning development. A scenario here, if you can see in my screen, medical school called Future is situated in a region that not only faces the risk of armed conflict, but it's also susceptible to labor disputes and seasonal floods. So there's a complicated scenario here. So الفكرة الأساسية بالنسبة للarmed conflict جاءت تحذيرات إنه والله اليونيفرسيتي حتكون في area active with armed conflict والlabor dispute will be triggered shortly، وموسم الأمطار والفيضانات جاية، وبالتالي الجروب متوقع to practice how we establish planning team for educational planning، وكيف نعمل education impact analysis، ونفس التولز دي I'll be sharing these، وكيف نعمل والله essential function recognition والresources required، كيف نضع objectives to avoid اللي هو health professional education system breakdown، وبعدين كيف الهيكل التنظيمي حتنفذه في جامعتك او المؤسسه اللي انت فيها، سواء كنت في وزاره الصحه او في مجلس التخصصات او الى اخره. وبعدين الاكسبكتد deliverables انه والله يا اخي نذكر we discuss and we address كل النقاط دي together. Hopefully another time we might meet inshallah ta'ala to discuss more, but inshallah I'll be sharing this shortly. Allow me to do so right now. Okay. Probably I'm going to upload it in the platform. Just Yeah, just to be available for everyone. Thank you very much. That comes to my to the end of my presentation. Please feel free to ask any question. We have 5 minutes to go. If you have any pending questions, queries, I'll happy to address it in the next 5 minutes. Any questions? Okay, let me see the Q&A. Okay, perfect. So, given that we have no question, that lead me to take away messages in 1 minute before we close our first workshop in ShadCon 2023. Where is it? Okay. Yes. Brilliant. So just a few takeaway messages. Allow me to share my screen, please, to conclude our session for today. Um, yeah. I assume you see my screen. So takeaway messages. First of all, thank you very much, and allow me just to provide some important takeaway messages. Firstly, please, we must recognize that the critical role of education continuity plan, the business continuity plans, in maintaining all aspects of health profession education operations during the disruption is something considerable. And this is not actually just about having a plan, but understanding its importance in saving or safeguarding the students' future and even our institution's reputation overall. The second takeaway message I would like to address here that business continuity plans, education continuity plans and program are most effective when there is a complete alignment within the organization. That means we need to ensure that our business continuity plan are synced with the overall mission and operations of the health education program, and that's from administration perspective point of view down to each department or unit in the university. Please, the third message is we need to proactively be implementing the mitigation strategies that can signify, by the way, and reduce the impact of the potential disruption that might happen, God forbidden, by addressing that, by addressing all these vulnerabilities early on. I think we can ensure that when challenges arise, God forbidden, the impact on our education delivery will be minimal, hopefully. Also, I would like to address that we are in era where technology can greatly enhance our emergency response capabilities. Please invest in robust IT infrastructure in your schools, virtual learning environments, and of course telemedicine. All these can revolutionize how we can continue to educate, train the health care professions, and even the face of adversity. Um, as we consider these key aspects, also let's think about how we can apply them in our current framework. What steps can we take to reinforce the importance of education continuity plans in our daily operation, and how can we better align our organization goals with our continuity planning? So all these, I hope that can be a continued discussion, whether in this conference or otherwise. That comes to the end of my session. جزيل الشكر لحضراتكم لتواجدكم لتفاعلكم عبر الشات. أتمنى أكون وفقت في تقديم مادة تفيد. إن شاء الله I'll be sharing all the needed materials to all participants, and I hope this discussion continues not only in the conference. I think beyond that, that will be great. أختم بسبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. جزيل الشكر لجميع الحضور، وعلى أمل أن نلقاكم إن شاء الله تعالى في other session. I would like to remind everyone that there will be very interesting sessions today. Allow me also, there's a question here from Professor Ahmed Omar. How do we marry the education continuity plan with the individual and family continuity plan? That's a brilliant question. As I mentioned, Dr. Ahmed, the concept of education continuity planning is part of an overall framework. So basically, there is a business continuity plan. Within it, there is an education continuity plan that have several layers that needs to be considered. But you, as part of this educational process, you need to plan for your unit, for your department, for your family, for yourself as a faculty, how you will play your role in this framework. So basically, it's already integrated. However, the question will be how we do it and how we assure that this alignment happen in our system. And by having this framework in front of our eyes, I think the integration will be an easy piece and easy apple to be considered. Because the implication, if you think about it, the implication of it as an individual is very high in the overall system. So have your framework there. That include what needs to be done in the context of business continuity plan, and have the levels of the implementation within this framework. And by that, you will never miss your role in this framework. And through that, I mean, you will be definitely aligning with that through the implementation of the individual and family continuity planning. So thank you very much once again. I don't want to take much from your time, and I need to be punctual in the session. Please stay tuned in our next sessions today. Tomorrow, you're all invited to attend the other workshops and the main conference with our esteemed speaker. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك. السلام عليكم ورحمه الله تعالى وبركاته. Thank you very much.